Warriors hail. Welcome to our hall. Before we begin, I call upon all true followers of Odin to join our ranks, so make sure to subscribe to the channel to support our legion. As you can see, our channel is new, and every warrior is crucial to our journey. Subscribe to strengthen our horde and make our battle cry echo across all lands. Also, tell us in the comments where you're from. Do we have battle brothers from the northern or southern lands? I want to get to know our brotherhood. Raise your mugs and toast with us by clicking the like button. Do all of this because together, we will conquer not just lands, but Valhalla itself. All because the crisp autumn air bit at my cheeks as I trudged through the dense forest, my boots crunching on fallen leaves. I had wandered farther from our village than ever before, driven by an inexplicable urge to explore. As the son of Jarl Bjorn the Bold, I should have been content with my life of privilege, but something within me yearned for more. As I pushed through a thicket, I stumbled into a small clearing. There, bathed in a shaft of sunlight, stood an ancient rune stone. Its weathered surface was covered in intricate carvings, the likes of which I had never seen before. I approached cautiously, my heart pounding with excitement and trepidation. My fingers traced the deep grooves of the runes, and I whispered the words aloud. Der fe deja frender, der skjalfar it sama. As I spoke, a chill ran down my spine, and the wind seemed to whisper back to me. The cattle die, kinsmen die, the self must also die, I translated, recognizing the verse from the Havamal, the ancient wisdom of Odin himself. I had heard snippets of these teachings before, but never had I seen them carved in stone, hidden away in this secret glade. As I continued to read, a voice behind me made me jump. "Ah, young leaf, I see you found something interesting." I whirled around to see Astrid, our village's vulva, or seeress. Her eyes twinkled with amusement as she leaned on her staff. "Astrid, I didn't mean to wander so far," I stammered, suddenly feeling like a child caught stealing sweets. She waved her hand dismissively. "Nonsense, boy. You were meant to find this place. The All-Father works in mysterious ways." I glanced back at the runestone. "This is Havamal, isn't it? The words of Odin?" Astrid nodded, her expression growing serious. "Indeed it is. And not just any verses, but ones that speak of the impermanence of life and the enduring power of reputation. Tell me, Leif, why do you think you were drawn here today?" Before I could answer, a horn sounded in the distance, 3 long blasts that echoed through the trees. My blood ran cold. It was the signal for trouble in the village. "We must go," I said, already turning to leave. Astrid's hand on my arm stopped me. "Remember this place, Leif. You will need its wisdom sooner than you think." We hurried back to the village, my mind racing with possibilities. Had we been attacked? Was there a fire? Nothing could have prepared me for the sight that greeted us as we emerged from the forest. A crowd had gathered outside my father's longhouse. As I pushed through the throng, I heard snippets of worried conversation. "The Jarl has fallen. So suddenly. What will become of us?" My heart pounding, I burst through the door to find my father, the great Bjorn the Bold, lying pale and weak on his bed. Our healer, Sigrid, knelt beside him, her face etched with concern. "Father!" I cried, rushing to his side. His eyes fluttered open and a weak smile crossed his lips. "Leif, my son, where have you been?" I was in the forest," I replied, guilt washing over me. "Father, what happened?" Sigrid spoke up, her voice low and urgent. "He collapsed during the council meeting. I've never seen anything like it. It's as if his strength has been drained away." My father's hand gripped mine with surprising strength. "Leif, listen to me. You must lead in my stead until I recover." The weight of his words hit me like a war hammer. "But Father, I'm not ready. I don't know how to lead our people." He shook his head weakly. "You must learn quickly. Our people need a strong leader. As if to emphasize his point, a commotion erupted outside. I reluctantly left my father's side and stepped out to address the gathered villagers. Their faces turned to me, a mix of fear, hope, and skepticism evident in their expressions. Thorstein, one of our most respected warriors, spoke up. "Leif, what news of the Jarl? Who will lead us?" I swallowed hard, trying to project a confidence I didn't feel. "My father is unwell, but he will recover. Until then, I will lead our clan as best I can." A murmur rippled through the crowd. I saw doubt in many eyes, and I couldn't blame them. I was barely a man, untested in leadership. Just then, Astrid pushed her way to the front. "The gods have chosen this moment for a reason," she declared, her voice carrying across the gathering. "Young Leif has been touched by the wisdom of Odin himself this very day. We must have faith." Her words seemed to calm the crowd somewhat, but I could still sense their unease. As the villagers dispersed, I felt the enormous weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders. That night, as I sat by my father's bedside, a messenger arrived, breathless and wide-eyed. "Leif, ships have been spotted off the coast. They bear the banner of Ivar the Ruthless." My heart raced. Ivar was a notorious raider who had long coveted our lands. This was the moment my father had always feared, and now he lay helpless, leaving me to face this threat. "How many ships?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "3 longships, my lord. They'll make landfall by dawn." I nodded, my mind whirling. "Gather the war council. We ride to meet them." As our warriors prepared for battle, I found myself standing before the great statue of Odin in our village square. I looked up at the All-Father's stern visage, remembering the words I had read on the runestone. "The cattle die, kinsmen die, the self must also die," I whispered. "But I know one thing that never dies, the reputation of each one who is dead." With those words echoing in my mind, I made a fateful decision. Instead of meeting Ivar's forces on the beach where their superior numbers would overwhelm us, I ordered our warriors to lay an ambush in the forest. "We'll let them land," I explained to the skeptical war council. "Then when they're spread out and searching for our village, we'll attack from all sides." Thorstein shook his head. "It's too risky. We should face them head-on, as your father would have done." His words stung, but I stood my ground. "My father isn't here. We must use our wits as well as our weapons." As dawn broke, we watched from the trees as Ivar's ships landed. His warriors poured onto the beach, confident in their victory. We waited, tense and silent, as they moved into the forest. When they were deep among the trees, I gave the signal. Our warriors erupted from their hiding places, catching the invaders by surprise. The forest echoed with the clash of steel and the cries of the wounded. For a moment, it seemed my plan would work, but then I heard a horn blast from the beach. More of Ivar's men had remained with the ships, and now they were coming to reinforce their comrades. Caught between two forces, our warriors began to falter. I saw friends and kinsmen fall, and the bitter taste of failure filled my mouth. In that moment, I realized the folly of my plan. In trying to be clever, I had underestimated our enemy and put my people at risk. As we retreated, fighting for every step, the words from the runestone came back to me. "The unwise man thinks he will live forever if he keeps from fighting." I had tried to outsmart our foes instead of facing them bravely, and now we were paying the price. We managed to escape back to our village, but at a terrible cost. Many of our best warriors lay dead in the forest, and Ivar's forces were regrouping for another attack. As I stood among the wounded in the mourning, I felt the eyes of my people upon me. Their gazes held not just sorrow but accusation. I had failed them in my first test as a leader. Ashamed and desperate, I remembered Astrid's words about the runestone. Perhaps there, in the ancient wisdom of Havamal, I could find the guidance I so desperately needed. As night fell and our remaining warriors prepared for a final stand, I slipped away into the darkness. The path to the runestone seemed to call to me, a beacon of hope in my darkest hour. I swear by Odin's eye, I whispered as I ran. I will unlock the secrets of Havamal. I will learn to be the leader my people deserve, or I will die in the attempt. The salty spray of the sea stung my face as I stood at the prow of our longship, the Raven's Wing. The rhythmic creaking of wood and the steady beat of the drum keeping time for our rowers filled the air. I clutched the fragment of the runestone I had broken off, its runes a constant reminder of my quest. "Leaf, we've spotted land," shouted Halfdan, my childhood friend and now my most trusted warrior. I squinted at the horizon, making out the faint smudge of green. "Not our destination," I replied, shaking my head. "We sail on." Halfdan frowned. "The men are tired, Leif. We've been at sea for weeks. Perhaps a short rest?" "No," I said firmly, turning to address the crew. "Listen, all of you. I know you're weary, but our people are counting on us. Every moment we delay is another moment our village remains vulnerable. We must find the wisdom of Havamal." A murmur of discontent rippled through the crew, but they bent to their oars once more. I felt a pang of guilt. These men had followed me on what must seem a fool's errand to many of them. But I couldn't turn back. Not when the future of our clan hung in the balance. As night fell, an unnatural stillness settled over the sea. The air grew heavy, and an eerie green light flickered on the horizon. Halfdan appeared at my side, his face grave. "I don't like this, Leif. The old ones speak of ghost lights that lead ships to their doom." I was about to dismiss his concerns when a deafening crack of thunder split the air. The sky opened up, releasing a torrent of rain that stung like needles. In an instant, our world became chaos. "Secure the sail!" I bellowed over the howling wind. "Halfdan, take the rudder!" Waves as tall as mountains crashed over our ship, threatening to swallow us whole. Men cried out in terror as they were nearly swept overboard, clinging desperately to whatever they could grasp. As I fought to help secure our cargo, a massive wave struck the ship broadside. I lost my footing and was flung against the gunwale. Pain exploded in my ribs, and for a moment the world went dark. When I came to, I found myself dangling half over the side of the ship, the roiling sea eager to claim me. As I struggled to pull myself back, a memory flashed through my mind. Words from the Havamal I had read on the runestone. "A man should be wise, but not too wise. The wisest man knows that he knows not all." In that moment, I realized my folly. In my eagerness to prove myself, I had led my men into peril. We were not meant to challenge the sea gods in their domain. "Turn the ship!" I shouted to Halfdan. "Make for the nearest land." Halfdan's eyes widened in surprise, but he nodded, wrestling with the rudder to bring us about. The next hours were a blur of struggle against the relentless storm, but slowly, surely, we began to make headway. As dawn broke, the storm subsided, revealing a mist-shrouded shoreline ahead. With the last of our strength, we beached the Raven's Wing on a pebbly shore, collapsing onto the land in exhausted relief. "You've led us to the end of the world, Leif," grumbled Bjorn the Red, spitting seawater. "What now?" I looked around at the strange, mist-covered landscape. Twisted trees loomed in the distance, their branches reaching out like gnarled fingers. "We rest, repair the ship, and then we'll decide our next move." As the men set up camp, I wandered along the shoreline, lost in thought. The weight of leadership felt heavier than ever. Had I doomed us all with my reckless quest? "You look troubled, young one," came a gravelly voice from behind me. I spun around, hand flying to my sword. Before me stood an old man, hunched and leaning on a gnarled staff. His hood was pulled low, obscuring much of his face, but I could see one eye glinting with an unnatural light. "Who are you?" I demanded. "Where did you come from?" The old man chuckled, a sound like stones grinding together. "I am a wanderer, nothing more. As for where I came from, well, I could ask you the same question, couldn't I?" Despite my wariness, I felt drawn to this strange figure. We're seeking wisdom, I found myself saying. The teachings of Havamal, to be precise. Ah, Havamal, the old man nodded sagely. The High One's words, a noble quest indeed. But tell me, young chieftain, why do you seek this wisdom? I hesitated, then decided to tell him the truth. As I recounted the events that had led me here, my father's illness, the attack on our village, my failures as a leader. The old man listened intently, nodding occasionally. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke. You've shown courage in admitting your mistakes, Leif Bjornsson. That is the beginning of wisdom. But are you prepared for what comes next? What do you mean? I asked, a shiver running down my spine. The old man straightened, seeming to grow taller. The mist swirled around him, and suddenly I knew I was in the presence of something far more than a mere wanderer. I am Odin, he declared, his voice resonating with power. The All-Father, the Wise One, giver of the Havamal. You have sought my wisdom, Leif, and now I offer you a chance to earn it. I fell to my knees, awe and fear warring within me. My lord Odin, I am unworthy. Silence, Odin commanded, though not unkindly. Worthiness is not given, it is earned. I offer you a series of trials, based on the wisdom of Havamal. Complete them, and you will gain the knowledge you seek, and more. My mind raced. This was beyond anything I had imagined when I set out on this quest, but I thought of my father, my clan, all those counting on me. I couldn't turn back now. I accept, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Odin nodded, a hint of a smile visible beneath his hood. Good. Your first trial begins now. Remember these words from Havamal. Better gear than good sense a traveler cannot carry. You and your men will need both for what lies ahead. With that, he struck his staff against the ground. A thunderclap shook the earth, and when I looked up, Odin was gone. In his place stood a massive stone arch, runes glowing along its surface. I hurried back to our camp, my mind whirling with what had just occurred. As I approached, Halfdan ran to meet me. Leif, where have you been? You won't believe what's appeared on the beach. I looked at my friend, a mix of excitement and trepidation coursing through me. Gather the men, Halfdan. Our real journey is about to begin. As my crew assembled, their faces a mix of confusion and awe as they gazed at the mysterious arch. I took a deep breath. The weight of leadership settled on my shoulders once more. But this time, it felt different. This was my chance to prove myself, to gain the wisdom I needed to protect my people. Men of the Raven's Wing, I addressed them, my voice carrying over the sound of the waves. The gods have set a challenge before us. It will be dangerous, and I cannot promise that we'll all return. But if we succeed, we'll gain the wisdom to save our clan and secure our place in the sagas. Who will stand with me? For a moment, there was silence. Then Halfdan stepped forward, placing his hand on my shoulder. I'm with you, Leif. To Helheim and back if need be. One by one, the others joined in, their voices rising in a battle cry that echoed across the misty shore. As I led them towards the glowing arch, the words of Havamal echoed in my mind. Cattle die, kinsmen die, you yourself will also die, but the word of praise will never die, if you have earned it. Whatever trials lay ahead, I was determined to face them with courage and earn that undying praise. For my clan, for my father, and for the legacy I would leave behind. The world spun around us as we stepped through Odin's glowing arch. When the dizziness subsided, I found myself standing alone before a massive wooden structure, its dragon-headed roof towering against a star-filled sky. The smell of smoke, mead, and roasted meat filled the air, along with the sound of raucous laughter and the clash of drinking horns. I realized with a start that I stood before a great mead hall, one larger and grander than any I had seen before. My men were nowhere in sight. Clearly, this trial was mine alone to face. Taking a deep breath, I approached the heavy oak doors. As I reached for the handle, The words of Havamal came to me unbidden. "Hail, ye givers! A guest is come. Say, where shall he sit within? Much pressed is he who fain on the hearth would seek for warmth and weal." With these words in mind, I pushed open the doors and stepped into the hall. The cacophony within ceased abruptly as all eyes turned to me. The hall was filled with warriors, their faces hard and unfamiliar, adorned with scars and tattoos that marked them as members of the Bear Clan, our bitter rivals for generations. An imposing figure rose from the high seat at the far end of the hall. "Well, well," he growled, his voice carrying easily across the now silent room. "What have we here? A lost lamb wandering into the bear's den?" Laughter rippled through the crowd, but I stood my ground. I recognized the speaker as Ulf the Unforgiving, Jarl of the Bear Clan. His reputation for cruelty was well known throughout our lands. Fighting down my fear, I spoke clearly, letting my voice carry to all corners of the hall. "Hail, noble hosts! I am Leif Bjornsson, and I come seeking warmth and welcome in this fine hall." Murmurs of surprise and derision swept through the gathered warriors. Ulf's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Bjornsson, you say? Son of our old enemy? You have some nerve, boy, walking in here alone and unarmed." I spread my hands, showing I carried no weapons. "I come in peace, bearing gifts for my gracious hosts." With that, I unslung the pack from my shoulder, a pack I hadn't been aware I was carrying until that moment. Odin's magic, no doubt. From the pack, I produced a finely wrought silver arm ring and a small cask of mead. "I offer these tokens of goodwill, and humbly request a place by your fire." Ulf descended from his high seat, his massive frame towering over me as he approached. He examined the gifts, his expression unreadable. The tension in the hall was palpable. I could feel dozens of hands inching towards weapon hilts. After what seemed an eternity, Ulf barked out a laugh. "Well spoken, young Bjornsson. You have courage. I'll give you that." He turned to his men. "What say you? Shall we show this pup some Bear Clan hospitality?" A cheer went up from the gathered warriors, though whether it was in genuine welcome or anticipation of violence I couldn't tell. Ulf clapped a meaty hand on my shoulder, nearly driving me to my knees. "Come, sit by the fire. Let's hear what brings the son of our old foe to our hall." As I was led to a place of honor near the central hearth, drinks were poured, and the noise level in the hall gradually returned to its previous roar. I sipped cautiously at the strong mead offered to me, knowing I would need my wits about me. Ulf leaned in, his breath hot on my ear. "Now then, boy, tell me why you're really here." I chose my words carefully. "I seek wisdom, Jarl Ulf, the kind that can only be gained through experience and interaction with those different from ourselves." Ulf raised an eyebrow. "Wisdom, is it? And what makes you think you'll find that here, among us uncouth Bear Clan warriors?" "The wisest know that wisdom can be found in the most unexpected places," I replied, remembering another verse from Havamal. As the High One said, "Wit is needful to him who travels widely. Harm seldom befalls the wary." This elicited a grudging nod from Ulf. "You quote the words of Odin himself. Perhaps there's more to you than meets the eye, young Bjornsson." As the night wore on, I shared stories and drinks with the Bear Clan warriors, always mindful of Havamal's teachings on moderation and wise speech. Gradually, I felt the hostility in the room begin to thaw. However, not all were swayed by my words. A burly warrior named Bjorn Blackheart glowered at me from across the fire, his hand never straying far from his axe. Finally, he could contain himself no longer. "Enough of this," Bjorn roared, leaping to his feet. "Are we to sit here and make merry with the son of our enemy? I say we should split his skull and send a message to his weakling father." The hall fell silent once more. All eyes turned to Ulf, waiting to see how he would respond to this challenge to his hospitality. The Jarl's face darkened with anger, but before he could speak, I stood. "If you feel so strongly, Bjorn Blackheart, then perhaps we should settle this as true warriors do. I challenge you to holmgang." A collective gasp went up from the assembled warriors. Bjorn's eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed with cruel delight. "You're either very brave or very stupid, boy. Either way, you'll be dead come morning." Ulf raised his hand for silence. "So be it. At dawn you will meet in the sacred circle. Until then, let no man break the peace of this hall." As the excitement of the impending duel rippled through the crowd, I retreated to a quiet corner, my heart pounding. What had I done? Bjorn was a seasoned warrior, and I had seen the notches on his axe handle, each one representing a life taken in battle. Yet as dawn approached and we gathered in the misty field outside the hall, a strange calm settled over me. I remembered the words of Havamal. "Brave and generous is the man who trusts in himself and faces the fray." Bjorn and I faced each other across the hazel poles that marked the boundaries of our combat. He sneered, hefting his massive war axe. "Any last words, pup?" I drew my sword, its familiar weight comforting in my hand. "Only that I bear you no ill will, Bjorn Blackheart. May the gods judge us both fairly." With a roar, Bjorn charged. His axe whistled through the air, and it was all I could do to parry his furious blows. He was stronger than me, fueled by years of hate and battle lust. But as we fought, I remembered my father's teachings and the wisdom of Havamal. The unwise man thinks he will live forever if he keeps from fighting, but old age won't grant him a truce even if the spears do. I realized then that this fight was about more than just survival. It was a chance to break the cycle of violence between our clans. As Bjorn raised his axe for a killing blow, I saw an opening. With a quick thrust, I could have ended the fight and Bjorn's life. But instead, I twisted, letting his axe bite into the earth. In the moment of his overextension, I brought the flat of my blade down on his wrist, causing him to drop his weapon. In an instant, I had my sword at Bjorn's throat. The warrior's eyes were wide with shock and fear. The crowd held its breath, waiting for the killing stroke. Instead, I lowered my blade. "It's over, Bjorn Blackheart. There's been enough blood spilled between our clans." For a long moment, Bjorn stared at me in disbelief. Then, slowly, a grin spread across his face. He clasped my arm in a warrior's grip. "Well fought, young Bjornsson. You've earned my respect this day." A cheer went up from the gathered warriors, Bear Clan and my own men alike. As we made our way back to the hall, Ulf approached, a thoughtful expression on his face. "You've shown wisdom beyond your years today, Leif Bjornsson," the Jarl said. "Perhaps it's time our clans put aside old grievances. I offer you an alliance. Together we could be a force to be reckoned with in these lands." I felt a surge of hope at his words, but something in Ulf's eyes gave me pause. There was a glint of calculation there, a hint of hidden motive that set my instincts on edge. Remembering the caution advised by Havamal, I chose my response carefully. "Your offer honors me, Jarl Ulf. Let us celebrate this new friendship today, and speak more of alliances when clearer heads prevail." Ulf's smile didn't quite reach his eyes, but he nodded in agreement. As we returned to the hall for a feast in honor of the day's events, I couldn't shake the feeling that while I had passed Odin's test, a greater challenge still lay ahead. The words of Havamal echoed in my mind once more. "Praise day at evening, a wife when dead, a weapon when tried, a maid when married, ice when 'tis crossed, and ale when 'tis drunk." I had navigated the treacherous waters of hospitality and combat, but the true test of this newfound alliance was yet to come. The sun had barely crested the horizon when I arrived at the sacred grove where the thing was to be held. Already the clearing was alive with activity as representatives from various clans gathered for this crucial assembly. The air buzzed with tension and anticipation. Decisions made here today would shape the future of our people for generations to come. As I made my way through the crowd, I caught snippets of conversation that made my blood run cold. The raids from the east grow bolder. Our stores won't last another harsh winter. The old alliances are crumbling. I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of responsibility settle heavily on my shoulders. This would be my first thing as acting leader of my clan, and I was determined to make my voice heard. The horn sounded, calling the assembly to order. We gathered in a great circle, each clan's representative taking their place around a central stone that served as our speaker's platform. I noted with unease that Ulf the Unforgiving, Jarl of the Bear clan, was present. Our recent alliance still felt fragile, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he had ulterior motives. Thorvald the Elder, a respected neutral party, took his place atop the stone to oversee the proceedings. We gather here today, his voice rang out, to address the threats that face all our people. Let any who wish to speak step forward and be heard. Before I could even think, I found myself surging to my feet. I will speak, I declared, striding towards the central stone. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I could feel the eyes of every clan leader upon me as I took my place on the speaking stone. My heart raced, but I was determined to prove myself. Friends, kinsmen, noble jarls, I began, my voice stronger than I felt. We stand at a crossroads. The threats we face are grave, but I say we must meet them head-on. My clan proposes a great raid to the east, to strike at our enemies before they can. Sit down, boy, a voice cut through my speech. It was Hakon Ironsides, a grizzled veteran known for his tactical mind. You'd lead us into a war we're not prepared for. Stung by his dismissal, I pressed on. We must act now before it's too late. Our enemies grow stronger while we debate. Another voice interrupted, this time Inga the Wise, a respected vulva. And what of our dwindling resources? A raid won't fill our storehouses for winter. Flustered, I tried to address both concerns at once, my words tumbling out in a rush. But as I spoke, I saw the faces of the assembled leaders growing increasingly skeptical. Some were frowning, others whispering to their neighbors. I was losing them. Just as panic began to set in, a memory surfaced. Words from the Havamal that I had read on that fateful runestone. A wise man should be slow to speak and cautious in his replies, for the tongue is the root of much trouble, and oft speaks to its owner's harm. I fell silent mid-sentence, the wisdom of those words washing over me. In my eagerness to prove myself, I had spoken without truly listening, without considering the full scope of our problems. Well, Thorvald the Elder prompted. You were saying, young leaf? I took a deep breath, composing myself. Forgive me, I said, my voice now calm and measured. In my haste to offer solutions, I failed to fully grasp the complexity of our situation. I would hear more from those with greater experience before presuming to advise our course. A surprised murmur ran through the crowd. I stepped down from the speaking stone, returning to my place in the circle. As I sat, I caught an approving nod from Inga the Wise. For the next several hours, I listened intently as clan leaders, warriors, and elders took turns speaking. They laid out the various challenges we faced: dwindling resources, increased raiding from foreign shores, internal disputes threatening old alliances. I absorbed it all, building a more complete picture of our situation. As the discussion wore on, I began to notice something curious. Ulf the Unforgiving, usually vocal in these gatherings, remained uncharacteristically silent. Yet I saw him exchange subtle glances and nods with several other clan leaders throughout the proceedings. My instincts, honed by the trials Odin had set before me, prickled with suspicion. I recalled another verse from Havamal. The unwise man is awake all night, worrying over everything. He's weary when morning comes, and his woe remains as it was. Determined not to act rashly, I kept my peace and observed. As the assembly began to wind down, Ulf finally rose to speak. My friends, he began, his voice smooth as honey. We have heard much talk of the dangers we face. But I say, why should we weather these storms alone? I propose a grand alliance with my clan at its head. Together we can meet any threat. A chorus of agreement rose from several clan leaders, the same ones I had seen exchanging glances with Ulf earlier. It was then that the pieces fell into place. This had been Ulf's plan all along, to use the assembly's fears to position himself as supreme leader. I knew I had to act, but the words of Havamal still echoed in my mind. I needed to choose my words carefully. As the excitement over Ulf's proposal began to die down, I slowly rose to my feet. All eyes turned to me once more. "Friends," I began, my voice calm but carrying to every corner of the grove, "we have heard many wise words today. And indeed the idea of a grand alliance is appealing in these troubled times." Ulf smiled, clearly thinking he had my support. But I wasn't finished. "However," I continued, "I am reminded of another piece of wisdom from the Havamal. Preise niet een Tag bevor es Abend geworden. Never praise the day until evening has come." Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. I pressed on. "Before we rush to embrace this alliance, let us consider what it might truly mean. Would all clans have an equal voice, or would some be more equal than others? And what of the ancient autonomy our people have always cherished?" I turned to face Ulf directly. "Jarl Ulf, you speak of unity, yet I couldn't help but notice how you and certain other leaders seemed to be in silent agreement long before this proposal was voiced. One might almost think this alliance had been prearranged." A hush fell over the assembly. Ulf's face darkened with anger, but before he could speak, other voices rose up. "Is this true? Have we been manipulated? What game is being played here?" Thorvald the Elder raised his hands for silence. "Serious accusations have been made. Jarl Ulf, how do you respond?" Ulf's eyes blazed with fury as he glared at me. "You dare question my honor, boy? I ought to—" "A simple denial would suffice," I interrupted calmly. "Unless, of course, there is more to tell." The assembled leaders looked back and forth between Ulf and me, uncertainty clear on their faces. In that moment, I saw Ulf's carefully laid plans crumbling. "This is absurd," he sputtered. "I came here in good faith to consolidate power." Inga the Wise cut in, her eyes sharp. "The boy speaks truth. I have seen the signs as well." What followed was chaos as accusations flew and old grievances surfaced. But through it all, a new sense of unity emerged. Not the false unity Ulf had proposed, but a genuine desire to work together as equals to face our common threats. As the assembly finally dispersed with plans made for further meetings to address our challenges, I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Håkon Ironsides, the veteran who had dismissed me earlier. "Well played, young one," he said gruffly. "It seems there's more to you than meets the eye. Your father would be proud." I nodded my thanks, feeling a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. As I made my way home, the words of Havamal echoed in my mind once more. "The wise man's heart is seldom glad if he is truly wise, for the wise man knows what the world is like and how little cause there is for joy." I had won a victory today, but I knew our challenges were far from over. Yet armed with the wisdom of Havamal and the lessons I had learned, I felt ready to face whatever lay ahead. The journey to becoming the leader my people needed had only just begun. The salty wind whipped through my hair as I stood at the prow of our longship, my eyes fixed on the horizon. For days we had sailed, following whispered legends and half-forgotten tales of an island that held secrets beyond imagining. "Land ho!" came the cry from the crow's nest. My heart leaped as I saw the jagged silhouette of an island emerging from the mist. As we drew closer, I could make out sheer cliffs rising from the churning sea, their faces carved with runes so ancient they seemed to pulse with an otherworldly power. At the island's summit, barely visible through swirling clouds, stood a structure that could only be the fabled library. Halfdan, my loyal friend and second in command, approached me with concern etched on his weathered face. "Leif, are you certain about this? The tales speak of a monstrous guardian. Many have sought this place and none have returned." I nodded, my jaw set with determination. "We've come too far to turn back now, my friend. Whatever dangers await, we must face them. Our people are counting on us." As our ship anchored in a sheltered cove, I addressed the crew. "I go alone from here. The risks are too great for all of us to venture forth." Protests erupted, but I silenced them with a raised hand. This is my journey to make. If I do not return in 3 days, sail home and tell our people what became of me. With a heavy heart, I bid farewell to my companions and began the treacherous climb up the cliff face. The runes carved into the rock seemed to whisper as I passed, hinting at knowledge just beyond my grasp. As I crested the top of the cliff, I found myself on a windswept plateau. There, dominating the landscape, stood a massive structure of stone and iron, its walls covered in glowing runes. But between me and the library's entrance lay a sight that froze the blood in my veins. Coiled before the gates was a dragon of immense proportions, its scales shimmering like polished obsidian in the fading light. Steam rose from its nostrils as its eyes, burning like molten gold, fixed upon me. So, the dragon rumbled, its voice like rolling thunder. Another seeker of knowledge comes to test his fate. Tell me, little mortal, why should I not devour you where you stand, as I have done to so many before you? Fear threatened to overwhelm me, but I steeled myself, remembering the words of Havamal. With words a wit-steeped man should know how to deal, and his own mind to mind. For all know full well who when to the thing how oft the fool speaks foolishly. Taking a deep breath, I met the dragon's gaze. Great guardian, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I come not to challenge your might, but to engage your wisdom. Surely a being of your ancient power values knowledge as much as strength? The dragon's eyes narrowed, but I detected a glimmer of interest. You speak boldly for one so small. Very well, I shall grant you a chance to prove your worth. Answer my riddles 3, and I may yet allow you to pass. Hope surged within me. This was a challenge I could face. The dragon reared up, its voice booming across the plateau. First riddle: I have cities but no houses. I have mountains but no trees. I have water but no fish. What am I? My mind raced, considering and discarding possibilities. Then it struck me. A map, I declared. You are a map. The dragon's eyes widened slightly. Correct, you have some wit about you, it seems. But let us see how you fare with this. Second riddle: I am not alive, but I grow. I don't have lungs, but I need air. I don't have a mouth, but water kills me. What am I? This one gave me pause. I closed my eyes, visualizing the elements of the riddle. After a moment of intense concentration, the answer came to me. Fire, I exclaimed. You are fire. A low growl emanated from the dragon's throat, but whether from frustration or approval, I couldn't tell. Indeed, you prove more clever than most who come here. But do not grow overconfident. Your final test awaits. Third riddle: I am always hungry. I must always be fed. The finger I touch will soon turn red. What am I? This riddle was the most challenging yet. I paced before the dragon, muttering to myself as I turned the clues over in my mind. The dragon watched with amusement, smoke curling from its nostrils. As the silence stretched on, I felt panic beginning to set in. Then, unbidden, another verse from Havamal came to me. A foolish man among folk will find that his wit will fail him. Better to be silent than be scorned for speaking ill. I took a deep breath, calming my racing thoughts. I considered each element of the riddle carefully, letting the answer come to me rather than grasping desperately for it. Suddenly, it clicked. Fire, I exclaimed, then hesitated. No, not just fire. You are speaking of a specific type of fire, aren't you? The answer is a flame. The dragon reared back, its eyes wide with surprise. Twice in one contest you name fire, and twice you are correct. Truly, you have a keen mind, little mortal. I stood tall, feeling a surge of pride. I have answered your riddles 3, great guardian. Will you now grant me passage? The dragon's form began to shimmer and change. In a blinding flash of light, it transformed into a familiar figure. Odin himself, the All-Father, stood before me. Well done, Leif Bjornsson. Odin said, his one eye twinkling with approval. You have passed my test, proving that true strength lies not just in the arm, but in the mind as well. I fell to one knee, overwhelmed by the god's presence. My lord Odin, I am honored by your test. But tell me, why go to such lengths? Why not simply grant me access to the knowledge I seek? Odin's expression grew serious. Knowledge, young leaf, is a double-edged sword. It can elevate a leader to greatness or destroy them utterly. I needed to be certain you had the wisdom to wield it responsibly. With a wave of his hand, the massive doors of the library swung open. Enter, seeker of wisdom. But be warned, the knowledge contained within may be more than you bargained for. As quickly as he had appeared, Odin vanished, leaving me alone before the yawning entrance of the ancient library. Taking a deep breath, I stepped inside. The interior of the library was vast beyond imagining, stretching farther than my eyes could see. Rows upon rows of stone tablets lined the walls, each covered in runes that seemed to glow with an inner light. The air hummed with power, and I could feel the weight of centuries of accumulated knowledge pressing down upon me. As I moved deeper into the library, the runes on the tablets began to shift and change, forming words and images that danced at the edge of my comprehension. I saw visions of battles yet to be fought, of great kingdoms rising and falling, of wonders and terrors beyond my wildest dreams. The sheer volume of information threatened to overwhelm me. My head spun as I tried to take it all in, to memorize every detail that might help my people. But the more I learned, the more I realized how little I truly knew. Hours passed like minutes as I wandered the endless halls of knowledge. I learned of farming techniques that could triple our yields, of shipbuilding methods that would make our vessels swifter and stronger, of healing arts that could save countless lives. But I also saw dark knowledge, weapons of unimaginable destruction, curses that could lay waste to entire lands, secrets that no mortal was meant to know. As exhaustion began to set in, I slumped against a wall, my mind reeling. I had come seeking wisdom to lead my people, but now I questioned whether any mortal could bear the weight of such knowledge. In my despair, I remembered yet another verse from Havamal. A man should know something of every subject, but be master of one. With renewed clarity, I realized the folly of trying to absorb all the library had to offer. Instead, I focused my efforts on the knowledge most crucial to my people's immediate needs: better farming methods, improved defenses, and diplomatic strategies to forge lasting alliances. As I made my way back to the library's entrance, my head full of carefully selected knowledge, I felt both elated and humbled. I had gained wisdom beyond measure, but I had also learned the importance of knowing one's limits. Stepping out into the sunlight, I was surprised to find Odin waiting for me once more. You have done well, Leif, he said. You sought knowledge, but you have gained wisdom as well. Remember this lesson as you lead your people. With a nod of thanks, I began the descent back to my waiting ship, my mind already racing with plans for the future. The journey home would be long, but I knew that the true test of my newfound knowledge was yet to come. As our longship set sail for home, Halfdan approached me. Well, Leif, did you find what you were looking for? I gazed out at the horizon, a small smile playing on my lips. I found more than I ever imagined, my friend. But the real challenge lies ahead, using this knowledge wisely to guide our people through the storms to come. The familiar coastline of our homeland emerged from the mist, and my heart swelled with anticipation. After months of journeying and trials, we were finally home. As we drew closer, however, my joy turned to ash in my mouth. Plumes of black smoke rose from the hills where our village stood. The sound of battle cries and clashing steel carried across the water. By the gods, Halfdan breathed beside me. We're under attack. I gripped the ship's railing, my knuckles white. Row faster, I bellowed to the crew. Our people need us. As we beached our longship, the full extent of the disaster became clear. A massive army had laid siege to our village. Their banners, bearing the sigil of a snarling wolf, fluttered in the smoke-filled air. I recognized them as belonging to Wolfgar the Ruthless, a warlord from the eastern lands who had long coveted our territory. We fought our way up the beach, cutting down enemy scouts as we went. Finally, we reached the hastily erected defensive walls, where our warriors were making their last stand. "Leif!" cried a familiar voice. It was Astrid, the Vulva who had first set me on my quest for wisdom. Her face was streaked with soot and blood. "Thank the gods you've returned." "What happened here?" I demanded, ducking as an arrow whistled overhead. Astrid's eyes were grim. "Wolfgar came upon us 3 days ago with a force larger than any we've ever seen. We've held them off so far, but our numbers dwindle. I fear this may be our last day." I surveyed the battlefield, my heart sinking. For every one of our warriors there seemed to be 10 of Wolfgar's. Even with the knowledge I had gained, I couldn't see a way to overcome such odds. Then, unbidden, a verse from Havamal came to me. "A man is happy if he has a true friend to count upon, for nothing is better in life than a steadfast companion." In that moment, I knew what I had to do. I turned to Halfdan, clasping his shoulder. "Hold the defenses as long as you can. I must go." Confusion and alarm warred on his face. "Go? Leif, we need you here." I shook my head. "Trust me, old friend. This is our only hope." Before he could protest further, I slipped away, making for the hidden cove where we kept our fastest ship. As I prepared to set sail, Astrid appeared at my side. "Where are you going?" she asked. "To call upon the friends I've made on my journey," I replied, unfurling the sail. "It's our only chance." Astrid nodded, understanding dawning in her eyes. "May the winds be at your back, Leif. We'll hold out as long as we can." With a heavy heart, I sailed away from my besieged home, praying to all the gods that I wouldn't be too late. My first stop was the hall of Ulf the Unforgiving. Despite our past differences, I hoped the alliance we had forged at the Thing would hold true. As I approached his great hall, I was met with suspicion and drawn weapons. "I come seeking aid," I called out. "My people are under attack." Ulf himself appeared on the ramparts, his eyes narrowing as he recognized me. "Leif Bjornsson, you have some nerve coming here after the way you humiliated me at the Thing." I swallowed my pride, remembering another lesson from Havamal. To his friend, a man should bear him as friend, and gift for gift bestow. Laughter for laughter let him exchange, but leasing pay for a lie. "Jarl Ulf," I said, meeting his gaze. "I wronged you, and for that I apologize. But I come not for myself, but for all our people. If Wolfgar conquers my clan, yours will surely be next. Stand with us now, and let us forge a true alliance stronger than before." For a long moment, Ulf said nothing. Then, to my immense relief, he barked out a laugh. "Well spoken, young Bjornsson. Perhaps there's hope for you yet. We march at dawn." With Ulf's support secured, I sailed on, calling upon each of the friends and allies I had made during my quest. To Bjorn Blackheart, whom I had bested in Holmgang, I appealed to his warrior's honor. To Inga the Wise, I spoke of the knowledge that would be lost if Wolfgar's hordes were to triumph. At each stop, I was met with initial hesitation, but as I spoke from the heart, drawing upon the wisdom I had gained, I saw resolve harden in their eyes. One by one, they pledged their support. As dawn broke on the 5th day since I had left my home, I returned with a fleet of ships at my back. My heart soared as I saw our village still standing, though smoke rose from many buildings and the sounds of battle still filled the air. I raised my horn and blew a mighty blast. As if in answer, a cheer rose from the defensive walls. We had returned, and we had not come alone. The battle that followed was fierce and terrible. Wolfgar's forces, caught between our reinvigorated defenders and the fresh troops of our allies, fought with the desperation of cornered animals. The clash of steel on steel filled the air, punctuated by war cries and the screams of the dying. I found myself face to face with Wolfgar himself, his wolf helm snarling as he swung his massive axe. "You think your little alliance can stop me?" he roared. "I'll crush you all and feast in your halls." As we fought, I recalled the wisdom of Havamal. The brave man well shall fight and win, though dull his blade may be. Though Wulfgar was stronger, I was quicker, and my mind was clear. I dodged his wild swings, waiting for my moment. When it came, I struck true, my sword finding the gap in his armor. Wulfgar fell, his eyes wide with disbelief. With their leader fallen, the enemy's resolve crumbled. By nightfall, the last of Wulfgar's forces had been driven from our lands, or had surrendered. As the dust settled, I surveyed the battlefield. Our victory had come at a great cost. Many good warriors, both from my clan and our allies, lay among the fallen. Buildings smoldered, fields were trampled, and the air was heavy with the scent of blood and smoke. Halfdan approached, his armor dented and bloodied, but a weary smile on his face. "We've won, Leif. Against all odds, we've won." I nodded, feeling the weight of leadership more heavily than ever. "Yes, but at what cost? Look around us, old friend. The price of victory is steep." Ulf the Unforgiving joined us, his bear-like frame imposing even in his battered state. "That's the nature of war, young Bjornsson. But take heart. We stand here together, allies in truth now. Your people do not stand alone." As if to emphasize his point, the other clan leaders gathered around, each offering words of support and solidarity. I felt a swell of emotion in my chest, recognizing the truth in Havamal's words about the value of true friends. Astrid appeared, her eyes shining with a mixture of sorrow and pride. "You've done it, Leif. You've saved our people and forged alliances that will stand for generations. Your father would be proud." At the mention of my father, I felt a pang of guilt. In all the chaos, I had nearly forgotten about his illness. "My father, how is he?" Astrid's expression softened. "He awoke during the siege, his strength returning just when we needed it most. He led the defense until you returned. He's resting now, but he asks for you." Relief washed over me. There was hope yet for a joyful reunion amidst the sorrow of our losses. As the sun set on that long and bloody day, I stood atop the walls of our village, looking out over the assembled forces of our new alliance. The bonds forged in battle would not easily be broken, I knew. We had faced our greatest challenge together and emerged stronger for it. Yet as I gazed at the burial pyres being prepared for our fallen, I was reminded of the heavy responsibility that came with leadership. The wisdom I had gained on my journey had saved us, but it had also shown me how much more there was to learn. Another verse from Havamal came to mind. "Cattle die, kinsmen die. The self must also die. But glory never dies, for the man who is able to achieve it." We had achieved glory this day, but the true test lay ahead. Rebuilding our homes, healing our wounds, and forging a lasting peace. As I descended from the wall to begin the long work ahead, I silently thanked Odin for the wisdom he had granted me and vowed to use it wisely in the days to come. The battle was won, but our journey was far from over. The acrid smell of smoke still hung in the air as I made my way through the village, surveying the damage from Wulfgar's siege. Everywhere I looked, our people were hard at work rebuilding, their faces etched with determination despite their weariness. As I passed, many nodded respectfully, some even offering words of gratitude for the victory we had achieved. Yet I could not shake the weight that pressed down upon my shoulders. I found myself outside my father's longhouse, hesitating at the threshold. Taking a deep breath, I pushed aside the heavy fur curtain and stepped inside. The air was thick with the scent of herbs and sickness. "Leif, my son," came my father's voice, weak but clear. "Come closer." I approached his bedside, my heart clenching at the sight of him. Once a giant of a man, my father now seemed small and frail, his skin pale and drawn, yet his eyes still burned with the same fierce intelligence I had always known. "Father," I said, kneeling beside him, "how are you feeling?" He managed a wan smile. "I've been better, boy. But I hear you've been busy while I've been lying here useless." I shook my head. "Never useless, Father. Astrid told me how you led the defense when the siege began. Our people would have fallen without your strength." Perhaps, he replied, his voice growing serious. But it's your strength they'll need now, Leif. I fear my time as leader is coming to an end. The words hit me like a physical blow. No, Father. You just need rest. You'll recover and... He raised a hand, silencing me. We both know that's not true, son. The clan needs a leader who can guide them through the challenges ahead. That leader must be you. I swallowed hard, feeling the full weight of his words settle upon me. I don't know if I'm ready, Father. His hand found mine, his grip surprisingly strong. You are ready, Leif. The wisdom you've gained on your journey, the alliances you've forged, these are the marks of a true leader. Trust in yourself, as I trust in you. Tears pricked at my eyes, but I blinked them away. I will do my best to honor your legacy, Father. He nodded, seeming to relax. I know you will, my son. Now go. Our people need you. As I stepped back out into the sunlight, I took a moment to compose myself. The responsibility I now bore seemed overwhelming, but I knew I could not show weakness. Not now, when our people needed strength and direction more than ever. I made my way to the great hall, where I had called a meeting of the clan's elders and most respected warriors. As I entered, the low murmur of conversation died away, all eyes turning to me. Friends, I began, my voice steady despite my inner turmoil. We have won a great victory, but our challenges are far from over. Our stores are depleted, our defenses weakened. We must act swiftly to ensure our survival through the coming winter. Brynjolf, our master builder, spoke up. We should focus all our efforts on rebuilding the outer walls. If we're attacked again... Walls won't fill empty bellies, interrupted Sigrid, our head farmer. The fields need tending or we'll starve before any enemy can reach us. Soon the hall was filled with raised voices, each arguing for their own priorities. I listened carefully, remembering Havamal's wisdom. The wise man should be slow to speak, and cautious in his replies, for the tongue is the root of much trouble, and oft speaks to its owner's harm. When the arguments had run their course, I raised my hand for silence. You all speak truth, I said. Our needs are many, and our resources few, but we cannot afford to be divided now. Here is what we shall do. I laid out a plan that balanced our various needs, setting some to repair the walls, others to tend the fields, and sending out small hunting parties to replenish our stores. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. As the meeting dispersed, I noticed a group of warriors lingering, their faces set in scowls. Thorvald, a respected veteran, approached me. You speak of balance and caution, he said, his voice gruff. But where is the strength in that? Your father would have called for raids to replenish our stores, to show our enemies we are not weakened. I met his gaze steadily. And how many warriors would we lose in such raids, Thorvald? How many fields would go untended, how many walls unrepaired? There is strength in wisdom, in knowing when to strike and when to rebuild. Thorvald's frown deepened. Pretty words, but words don't win battles. You've grown soft, Leif Bjornsson. Perhaps it's time for a leader with true warrior's blood. A tense silence fell over the hall. I could feel the eyes of everyone upon us, waiting to see how I would respond to this challenge. For a moment, anger flared within me, but I pushed it down, remembering another verse from Havamal. A man should be moderate in wisdom, not over-cunning or clever. The best of lives is led by those who know the fitting mean. I took a step closer to Thorvald, my voice low but carrying to every corner of the hall. You speak of warrior's blood, Thorvald. Then tell me, how many battles have you won with blood alone? How many wars have been decided by strength of arm rather than strength of mind? I turned to address the whole gathering. Our enemies fear us not just for our strength in battle, but for our resilience, our ability to rise from the ashes stronger than before. That is the true warrior's spirit. Not reckless aggression, but the wisdom to know when to fight and when to rebuild. I could see uncertainty in some faces, but others were nodding in agreement. Thorvald opened his mouth to argue further, but before he could speak, a strange sensation washed over me. The hall seemed to fade away, replaced by a swirling mist. From the mist emerged a familiar figure, Odin himself, his one eye gleaming with otherworldly knowledge. "Heed my words, Leif Bjornsson," his voice echoed in my mind. "The trials you have faced are but a prelude. A storm gathers on the horizon, one that will test not just your strength but the very bonds of the alliances you have forged." Images flashed before my eyes. Great ships with dragon prows, warriors bearing unfamiliar weapons, a land across the sea ripe for conquest. As quickly as it had come, the vision faded, leaving me gasping in the suddenly silent hall. "Leif?" It was Astrid, concern etched on her face. "Are you well?" I blinked, my mind reeling from what I had seen. I am fine," I managed. "But we have much work to do. Our greatest challenge yet lies ahead." As I began to explain the vision, I could see the doubt in Thorvald's eyes turn to grudging respect. The weight of leadership still pressed heavily upon me, but I knew now that I did not bear it alone. With the wisdom of Havamal to guide me and the strength of our people behind me, we would face whatever storms the future might bring. That night, as I stood atop our newly reinforced walls, gazing out at the star-filled sky, I found myself whispering another verse from Havamal. "Cattle die, kinsmen die. One day you yourself must die, but the words of praise will not perish when a man wins fair renown." Whatever challenges lay ahead, I vowed to face them with courage, wisdom, and the unbreakable bonds of friendship we had forged. The saga of our people was far from over, and I would ensure that the next chapter would be one of triumph, not tragedy. The autumn winds carried a chill that spoke of the harsh winter to come. I stood atop the newly reinforced walls of our village, surveying the bustling activity below. Our people had worked tirelessly to rebuild and prepare for the coming season, their spirits bolstered by our recent victory and the strength of our new alliances. As I descended to join the morning's council meeting, I noticed a commotion near the village gates. A small group of strangers had arrived, led by a man whose appearance immediately set him apart. He wore a long brown robe, cinched at the waist with a simple rope, and around his neck hung a strange symbol, a man nailed to crossed beams. Frowning, I made my way towards the gathering crowd. Halfdan intercepted me, his expression troubled. "Leif, you should hear what this man is saying," he muttered. "He speaks of a new God, one who promises salvation and eternal life." I nodded grimly, having heard whispers of such missionaries in other lands. "Let us hear what he has to say then." As we approached, the stranger's voice carried clearly over the murmuring crowd. "And so I tell you, good people, that there is but one true God, and his Son, Jesus Christ, died for your sins. Embrace his love, turn from your pagan ways, and you shall know eternal peace in heaven." The crowd's reactions were mixed. Some scoffed openly, while others listened with rapt attention. I stepped forward, and the people parted to let me through. "Welcome, stranger," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "I am Leif Bjornsson, leader of this clan. What brings you to our shores?" The man turned to me, his eyes alight with fervor. "Greetings, Leif Bjornsson. I am Brother Alrik, a humble servant of God. I have come to bring the light of Christ to your people, to save your souls from the darkness of heathen ways." A ripple of unease went through the crowd at his words. Thorvald, the warrior who had challenged me earlier, pushed his way forward. "Save our souls?" he spat. "Our gods have protected us for generations. We need no salvation from your nailed god." Others voiced their agreement, but I noticed some, particularly among the younger members of our clan, watching Brother Alrik with curiosity rather than hostility. I raised a hand for silence. "Brother Alrik, while we appreciate your concern for our souls, we have our own gods and traditions. What makes you think we would abandon them for your foreign deity?" Alrik's smile was gentle, but his eyes burned with conviction. "Because, good Leif, your gods are false idols. powerless figments of imagination. The one true God offers eternal life and salvation. He is a God of love and forgiveness, not of war and bloodshed. His words struck a chord with some in the crowd. I heard murmurs of interest, even agreement. But others grew angry, shouting insults and challenges. Before the situation could escalate, I intervened. Enough. Brother Alric, you and your companions may stay in our village for now. We will listen to what you have to say. But, I added, fixing him with a stern gaze, you will respect our ways and our gods while you are here. Is that understood? Alric bowed his head. Of course, Leif Bjornsson. We come in peace, seeking only to share the truth. As the crowd dispersed, I could feel the tension in the air. This missionary's presence threatened to drive a wedge between our people at a time when unity was crucial. Over the next few weeks, Brother Alric and his followers set about their work with zeal. They spoke to anyone who would listen, offering comfort to the grieving, hope to the downtrodden, and promises of a better life to all who would embrace their faith. To my dismay, I saw their words taking root. Small groups began gathering in secret to pray to this new God. Some even spoke of abandoning our traditional ways entirely. One evening, as I sat in the great hall pondering this dilemma, Astrid the Vulva approached me. Her face was lined with worry. Leif, she said, her voice low. We must do something about these Christians. Their teachings are poison to our ways. If we allow this to continue, our people will forget the old gods and we will lose their protection. I sighed heavily. I know, Astrid. But what would you have me do? Banish them? That would only make martyrs of them and strengthen their cause. And some of our own people now follow their ways. Would you have me cast them out as well? Astrid's eyes flashed. If necessary, yes. Better to lose a few than to see our entire way of life destroyed. Her words troubled me deeply. I found myself torn between my duty to protect our traditions and the nagging feeling that there might be some truth in the Christian message of love and forgiveness. That night, sleep eluded me. I tossed and turned, my mind racing with possible solutions to this crisis. In my restlessness, I found myself reciting verses from Havamal. Cattle die, kinsmen die, one day you yourself must die. But the words of praise will not perish when a man wins fair renown. As I pondered these words, a realization began to form. Our reputation, our legacy, these were what truly mattered. Not rigid adherence to tradition, nor blind acceptance of new ways, but how we conducted ourselves in the face of change. The next morning, I called for a gathering of all our people, including Brother Alric and his followers. As they assembled in the great hall, I could feel the tension in the air, the unspoken divisions that threatened to tear us apart. Taking a deep breath, I addressed the crowd. My friends, my family, my people, we stand at a crossroads. For generations we have followed the old ways, honoring the gods of our ancestors. Now, a new faith has come to our shores, offering a different path. I paused, letting my gaze sweep across the assembled faces, those who clung fiercely to tradition, those who had embraced the new faith, and those caught uncertainly between. There are those among us who would have me cast out these newcomers to cling to our old ways without question. And there are those who would have us abandon our heritage entirely, embracing this new God without reservation. But I say to you, neither path is wise. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, but I pressed on. Our strength has always lain in our ability to adapt, to take the best of what we encounter and make it our own. Why should matters of faith be any different? I turned to Brother Alric. Your God speaks of love and forgiveness. These are noble ideals, not so different from the virtues our own gods espouse. But can your God of love truly demand that we abandon the traditions that have sustained us for generations? Alric opened his mouth to speak, but I held up a hand. And to those who would cling blindly to the old ways, I ask you this. If our gods are truly strong, truly worthy of our devotion, can they not withstand the challenge of a new faith? Are we so insecure in our beliefs that we must silence all other voices? I took a moment to let my words sink in before continuing. From this day forward, let it be known that in our clan, all are free to worship as they choose. Those who wish to follow the old gods may do so, with all the rites and traditions we have always honored. Those who wish to embrace this new faith may do so without fear of persecution. The hall erupted in a cacophony of voices, shouts of approval, cries of outrage, heated debates breaking out in every corner. I raised my voice to be heard over the din. But hear me well, this freedom comes with responsibility. No one, whether follower of the old gods or the new, shall force their beliefs on others. We will respect each other's choices, and we will judge each other not by the gods we worship, but by the strength of our character and our devotion to our clan. As the noise gradually subsided, I saw a mix of emotions on the faces before me. Relief, uncertainty, grudging acceptance. Brother Alric stepped forward, his expression thoughtful. "Leif Bjornsson," he said, "your words show great wisdom. While I believe with all my heart that there is but one true God, I cannot deny the nobility of your decision. Perhaps there is more common ground between our beliefs than I first thought." Astrid, standing nearby, nodded slowly. "It goes against everything I have ever known," she admitted, "but I cannot argue with the logic. Our gods have always valued courage and honor. Surely allowing our people to choose their path freely honors those virtues." In the days that followed, our village found a new equilibrium. While tensions remained, they gradually eased as people learned to coexist despite their differences. I saw friendships form between followers of the old gods and the new, each learning from the other's perspective. As I watched our people navigate this new reality, I was reminded once again of Havamal's wisdom. Moderately wise a man should be, not over-cunning or clever. The best of lives is led by those who know the fitting mean. We had found our middle ground, a path that honored both our heritage and the potential of new ideas. It would not be an easy road, but I was confident that by facing this challenge with open minds and respect for one another, we would emerge stronger than ever. As the first snows of winter began to fall, I stood once again atop our walls, gazing out at the horizon. The future remained uncertain with greater challenges yet to come, but I took comfort in knowing that our people, united in their diversity, were ready to face whatever lay ahead. The harsh winter had finally released its grip on our lands, but as the snow melted and the first green shoots emerged from the earth, a new and terrible threat arose. It began quietly at first, a few cases of fever and cough that we attributed to the usual spring illnesses, but soon the sickness spread like wildfire through our village and beyond. I stood in the makeshift infirmary we had set up in the great hall, my heart heavy as I surveyed the rows of sick and dying. The air was thick with the scent of herbal remedies and the sounds of labored breathing. Astrid moved among the afflicted, her face drawn with exhaustion as she tended to their needs. "How many more?" I asked softly as she approached. She shook her head, her eyes filled with sorrow. "5 more since dawn, and there are reports of entire families falling ill in the outlying farms." I clenched my fists, feeling utterly helpless in the face of this invisible enemy. "There must be something more we can do. Have we tried?" My words were cut short by a commotion at the entrance. Halfdan burst in, supporting a pale and sweating figure, my father. "No," I breathed, rushing to his side. "Father." Together, Halfdan and I helped him to an empty pallet. My father's skin burned with fever, his breath coming in short, painful gasps. "Leif," he managed, his voice barely a whisper. "Our people, you must save your strength," I urged, clasping his hand. "We'll find a way to beat this, I swear it." As Astrid began tending to my father, I stepped outside, needing a moment to collect myself. The village, usually bustling with activity in the spring, was eerily quiet. Those who weren't sick huddled in their homes, fear keeping them isolated. "Leif," a voice called out, and I turned to see Bjorn, one of our scouts, running towards me. "Leif, there's a stranger at the gates. He says he has knowledge that can help us. Hope flared in my chest, and I hurried to the village entrance. There, flanked by wary guards, stood a figure shrouded in a dark cloak. As I approached, he lowered his hood, revealing a face lined with age and eyes that seemed to hold unfathomable depths. "Who are you?" I demanded. "And what do you know of our plight?" The stranger's voice was low and gravelly. "I am Grim, a wanderer and seeker of hidden lore. I have seen this sickness before, in lands far from here, and I know of a way to end it." My heart raced. "Tell me," I urged. "Whatever the cost, if it will save our people, I'll pay it." Grim's eyes seemed to pierce my very soul. "Are you certain of that, Leif Bjornsson? For the price is steep indeed." He spoke of an ancient ritual, one that would call upon powers older than the gods themselves. It would drive the sickness from our lands, healing those afflicted and protecting those still healthy. But it required a sacrifice, the willing offering of a leader's life force. "The one who performs the ritual," Grim explained, "must be of noble blood and pure intent. They will not die, not in the usual sense, but their essence, their very being, will be used to fuel the magic that will save your people." I felt a chill run down my spine. "And what becomes of them after?" Grim's expression was grave. "They will exist in a state between life and death, forever bound to the land they saved, neither fully here nor gone, a guardian spirit for generations to come." The weight of his words settled heavily upon me. It was a terrible price, an eternity of half-existence. But as I thought of my father lying ill, of the families torn apart by this plague, I knew what I had to do. "I'll do it," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Tell me what must be done." Grim nodded solemnly. "Prepare yourself. When the moon is full 3 nights from now, we will perform the ritual atop the highest hill. Until then, meditate on your decision. For once begun, there is no turning back." As word spread of the ritual and what it would entail, reactions among our people were mixed. Many were grateful for the hope it offered, while others protested, unwilling to see their young leader sacrifice himself. Astrid confronted me in private, her eyes blazing. "You cannot do this, Leif. There must be another way." I shook my head. "We've tried everything else, Astrid. Our people are dying. If my sacrifice can save them, how can I not make it?" Her expression softened. "And what of your father? He needs you." The mention of my father sent a pang through my heart. I had been avoiding his sickbed, unable to face him with the knowledge of what I planned to do. As if summoned by our words, Halfdan appeared in the doorway. "Leif," he said urgently, "your father, he's awake, and he's asking for you." With a heavy heart, I made my way to my father's bedside. To my amazement, his fever had broken, and though he was still weak, his eyes were clear as they met mine. "My son," he said, his voice hoarse but stronger than it had been in days. "I've heard what you plan to do." I knelt beside him, taking his hand in mine. "Father, He squeezed my hand, silencing me. "I know why you feel you must do this, and I have never been more proud of you. But I cannot allow it." Confusion washed over me. "What do you mean?" My father struggled to sit up, and I helped him, propping him against the pillows. "I mean," he said, his voice gaining strength, "that I will take your place in the ritual." Shock coursed through me. "No, Father, you can't. You're still weak from the sickness, and our people need you." "They need you more," he interrupted. "You are the future of our clan, Leif. The alliances you've forged, the wisdom you've gained, these are what will lead our people through the challenges ahead." Tears stung my eyes. "But I can't lose you, not like this." My father's smile was gentle. "You won't lose me, son. I'll always be with you, watching over our people. And think, what better way for an old warrior to go, not withering away in bed, but giving his life to save his clan?" I opened my mouth to protest further, but the words died on my lips as I saw the determination in his eyes. This was the father I remembered from my youth, strong, resolute, unafraid of any challenge. As the night of the full moon approached, I found myself torn between relief that I would not have to leave my people and guilt that my father would make the sacrifice in my stead. I spent hours in meditation, seeking guidance from the gods and from the wisdom of Havamal. On the eve of the ritual, as the moon rose full and bright over our village, I made my way to the highest hill. There, I found Grim preparing the site, inscribing strange symbols on the ground with a mixture of ash and herbs. "Are you ready?" he asked as I approached. I took a deep breath. There's been a change. My father, he insists on taking my place. Grim's eyes narrowed. "And what do you say to this, Leif Bjornsson? Will you allow your father to make this sacrifice in your stead?" The question hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. I closed my eyes, remembering the words of Havamal. "A coward believes he will live forever if he holds back in battle, but in old age he shall have no peace. Those spears have spared his limbs." Opening my eyes, I met Grim's gaze. "No," I said, my voice firm. "This is my duty, my burden to bear. I will complete the ritual as planned." A hint of approval flickered in Grim's eyes. "Very well. Prepare yourself. We begin at midnight." As the hour approached, our people gathered at the base of the hill, their faces solemn in the moonlight. I saw my father among them, supported by Halfdan, his expression a mixture of pride and sorrow. Astrid approached me one last time. "Are you certain about this, Leif? There's still time to—" I silenced her with a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I'm sure, Astrid. Tell my father. Tell him I understand now. What it means to be a true leader." She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "We will never forget your sacrifice, Leif Bjornsson." As midnight struck, I took my place in the center of Grim's inscribed symbols. The old wanderer began to chant in a language I didn't recognize, his voice rising and falling like the tide. I felt a strange sensation building within me, as if my very essence was being drawn out. The world around me began to fade, the faces of my people blurring into a sea of light. In my last moments of mortal consciousness, I heard Grim's voice, clear and strong. "It is done. The plague is lifted. Your people are saved." As darkness closed in around me, I felt a profound sense of peace. I had fulfilled my duty as a leader, protecting my people to my last breath. And though I would no longer walk among them in flesh and blood, I knew that a part of me would always remain, watching over the clan I loved. In the years that followed, the people of our village would speak in hushed tones of the spirit that guarded their lands. A presence felt in the rustle of leaves, the whisper of the wind, the strength that filled them in times of need. The world slowly came back into focus, like emerging from a deep, dreamless sleep. I found myself lying on the cold ground atop the hill where the ritual had taken place. The first rays of dawn were just beginning to paint the sky, casting a soft golden light over the land. As I sat up, I was struck by how different everything felt. My senses seemed sharper, more attuned to the world around me. I could hear the faint rustling of leaves in the forest below, smell the rich earth and the lingering scent of the ritual herbs. And yet, I felt strangely disconnected, as if I were observing everything through a thin veil. "Welcome back, Leif Bjornsson," came Grim's gravelly voice beside me. Or perhaps I should say, "Welcome to your new existence." I turned to look at him, noting with surprise that I could see a faint shimmer of energy surrounding his form. What has happened to me?" Grim's eyes held a mixture of respect and something akin to pity. "You have become what the ritual demanded, a guardian spirit tethered to this land and its people. You live after a fashion, but you are no longer fully of this world." As his words sank in, I became aware of a deep connection to the land beneath my feet, as if I could feel every blade of grass, every tree root, every living creature within our territory. And beyond that, I sensed the life force of our people, a web of energy connecting every member of our clan. The plague? I asked urgently, suddenly remembering the purpose of my sacrifice. A rare smile crossed Grimm's weathered face. Gone. Your sacrifice has driven it from these lands. Even now the sick are recovering, and those untouched will remain protected. Relief washed over me, tempered by the realization of what I had given up. I would never again embrace my father, share a drink with Halfdan, or feel the simple joys of mortal life. And yet, I knew I would do it all again in a heartbeat to save my people. As we made our way down the hill, I saw a crowd gathered at its base. Word of the ritual's success had spread quickly. As I approached, I saw a mixture of awe and uncertainty on their faces. Could they see the change in me? My father stepped forward, his eyes brimming with unshed tears. "My son," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "What you have done." I reached out to embrace him, only to have my arms pass through his form like mist. The reality of my new existence hit me anew, and I saw the pain of it reflected in my father's eyes. "I'm still here, Father," I said softly. "Changed, but not gone. I will always watch over our people." Astrid approached, her gaze analytical as she studied me. "The old stories speak of guardian spirits," she mused, "but I never thought to see one with my own eyes. Leif, how do you feel?" I considered the question carefully. "I feel connected to the land, to our people. It's as if I can sense the very heartbeat of our clan." A murmur went through the crowd at my words. Some looked excited, others fearful. I realized that my new role would take some adjustment, not just for me, but for all our people. Over the days and weeks that followed, we all learned to adapt to this new reality. I found that while I could no longer interact with the physical world in the same way, my ability to perceive and influence events had grown exponentially. I could send my consciousness across our entire territory in an instant, sensing dangers and opportunities alike. Our clan began to prosper as never before. With my guidance, we avoided natural disasters, found rich hunting grounds, and navigated complex political situations with our neighbors. The story of my sacrifice spread, and our reputation grew. Many came to seek the wisdom of the guardian spirit of our clan. One crisp autumn evening, as I watched over our village from my favorite hilltop, I sensed a familiar presence materializing beside me. I turned to see Odin himself, in all his terrible glory, regarding me with his one piercing eye. "Leif Bjornsson," he intoned, his voice echoing with power. "You have done well, my chosen one. Your journey has been long and filled with trials, but you have emerged stronger for it." I bowed my head in respect. "All-Father, I have tried to use the wisdom you granted me for the good of my people." Odin's laugh was like distant thunder. "And so you have. Your actions have rippled across the tapestry of fate, influencing events far beyond these shores." He fixed me with an intense gaze. "You have proven yourself worthy, Leif. I come now to offer you a place among the gods themselves. Join us in Asgard, where you will feast in Valhalla and help shape the destiny of worlds." For a moment I was stunned by the offer. To become a god, to wield power beyond imagining. It was a temptation almost too great to resist. But as I looked down at the village below, seeing the people going about their evening routines, I felt the deep connection that bound me to them. "Great Odin," I said slowly, "I am honored beyond words by your offer, but I must decline." Surprise flickered across Odin's ageless face. "You would refuse godhood? For what purpose?" I gestured to the land around us. "My purpose is here, All-Father, in protecting these people and guiding them through the challenges to come. The wisdom of Havamal speaks of the importance of reputation and the fleeting nature of life. But it also teaches the value of friendship, of community, of finding one's place in the world. I have found mine." A slow smile spread across Odin's face. Ah, Leaf, you have learned the greatest lesson of all. True wisdom lies not in power or immortality, but in understanding one's purpose and embracing it fully. He placed a hand on my shoulder, and for a moment, I felt the full weight of his divine presence. You have chosen well, my son. Know that you have earned the respect of the gods this day. As Odin began to fade from view, he spoke one last time. Remember, Leif Bjornsson, that the wisdom you seek has always been within you. Havamal was but a guide to help you unlock your own potential. Continue to grow, to learn, and to lead. Your saga is far from over. With those words, he vanished, leaving me alone once more on the hilltop. But I no longer felt the isolation that had plagued me in the early days of my transformation. I was connected to something greater than myself, yet firmly rooted in the world I had sworn to protect. As the years passed, I watched generations come and go. I saw my father grow old and pass on, welcome to Valhalla with honor. I guided our clan through times of plenty and times of hardship, always striving to apply the wisdom I had gained throughout my journey. One summer evening, as I observed a group of children playing near the village, I overheard them telling stories about the guardian spirit that watched over their clan. To my surprise, they spoke not of a distant, godlike figure, but of a wise leader who had sacrificed everything for his people. They say he was a great warrior, one boy proclaimed, waving a stick like a sword. A girl with flowers in her hair shook her head. No, he was a clever trickster who could outsmart any foe. An older child, his eyes serious beyond his years, spoke up. My grandmother says he was both and more. She says he learned the secret wisdom of the gods and used it to protect us all. As I listened to their tales, embellished and changed by time but still holding kernels of truth, I realized that this too was a form of immortality. Not the eternal youth of the gods, but the lasting impact of a life well lived, of wisdom passed down through the ages. I thought back to the words of Havamal that had guided me throughout my journey. Cattle die, kinsmen die, one day you yourself must die, but the words of praise will not perish when a man wins fair renown. I understood now that these words were not just about seeking glory or fame. They were about leaving a lasting positive impact on the world, about living in such a way that your actions would continue to inspire and guide long after you were gone. As the children's laughter echoed through the village, I felt a profound sense of peace. The wisdom of Havamal had indeed been inside me all along, shaped by my experiences, my choices, and the love I held for my people. And as long as that wisdom continued to guide our clan, I knew that my sacrifice had been worth every moment. The sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple. I sent my consciousness out across our lands one last time, ensuring all was well before settling in for another night of vigilant guardianship. The musty scent of aged wood and forgotten memories filled my nostrils as I climbed the narrow stairs to my grandfather's attic. It had been years since anyone had ventured up here, and the task of clearing out the space felt more like an archaeological expedition than a simple cleaning job. "Freya, be careful up there," my mother's voice echoed from below. "Some of those floorboards are older than you are." I rolled my eyes, though a smile tugged at the corners of my mouth. "I'll be fine, Mom. I'm not exactly stomping around up here." As I reached the top of the stairs, I pulled the cord of a single bare bulb, casting a dim light over the cluttered space. Dust motes danced in the air, disturbed by my presence after years of stillness. Stacks of cardboard boxes loomed like miniature skyscrapers, their contents a mystery waiting to be unraveled. I moved carefully through the attic, my fingers trailing over old furniture draped in sheets. Each object seemed to hold a story, a piece of my family's history that I'd never known. As I neared the far corner of the attic, something caught my eye. A shape beneath a faded tarp that didn't quite match the other covered furniture. Curiosity piqued, I grasped the edge of the tarp and pulled it away, revealing a large, flat stone tablet. Strange symbols were carved into its surface, lines and curves that seemed both alien and oddly familiar. My heart raced as I realized what I was looking at, a runestone. "Mom," I called out, my voice trembling with excitement. "You need to see this." I heard her footsteps on the stairs, and moments later she appeared in the attic, slightly out of breath. "What is it, Freya? What did you find?" I gestured to the runestone, my eyes wide with wonder. "Look at this. It's a runestone, isn't it? What's it doing up here?" My mother's brow furrowed as she approached, her expression a mix of surprise and confusion. I had no idea this was here. Your grandfather never mentioned anything like this." As we stood there, staring at the ancient stone, a gust of wind rattled the attic window. The sudden noise made us both jump, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed, as if the very air around us had shifted. "We should get this downstairs," I said, already trying to figure out how to move the heavy stone. "Maybe we can find someone who can translate it." My mother nodded, still looking bewildered. "Yes, of course, I'll call your father. He can help us carry it down." As we maneuvered the runestone down the narrow attic stairs and into the living room, my mind raced with possibilities. What secrets did this stone hold? And why had my grandfather kept it hidden away for so long? The next morning, as I sat at the kitchen table, poring over photos I'd taken of the runestone, the letterbox clattered. I jumped up, grateful for the distraction from the frustrating symbols that refused to yield their meaning. "I'll get it," I called out, padding to the front door in my socks. Among the usual bills and junk mail was a thick envelope addressed to me in elegant, handwritten script. No return address. Intrigued, I tore it open and unfolded the letter inside. "Dear Ms. Larson," it began, "I hope this letter finds you well. My name is Professor Eric Magnusson, and I believe we share a common interest in the works of Snorri Sturluson and the hidden treasures of Norse mythology." My heart skipped a beat. How could this stranger know about my fascination with the prose Edda and its enigmatic author? The letter continued. "It has come to my attention that you may be in possession of a certain artifact, a runestone of great significance. If this is indeed the case, I implore you to contact me at once. There is much to discuss, and time may be of the essence." At the bottom of the letter was a phone number and an address in Reykjavik. I read and reread the letter, my mind spinning with questions and possibilities. "Mom," I called out, my voice cracking with excitement, "you're not going to believe this." I spent the next hour on the phone with Professor Magnusson, my initial skepticism giving way to genuine enthusiasm as he shared his theories about the runestone and its connection to lost manuscripts of the prose Edda. "You must understand, Ms. Larson," his accented voice crackled over the line. "These texts could revolutionize our understanding of Norse mythology and medieval Scandinavian literature. But they are also dangerous in the wrong hands." "Dangerous?" I echoed, a chill running down my spine. "How so?" There was a pause before he answered, his voice lowered as if afraid of being overheard. "There are those who believe the prose Edda contains more than just stories. Some say it holds the key to ancient power that could reshape the world as we know it." I swallowed hard, my mouth suddenly dry. "And you think this runestone is connected to these lost manuscripts?" "I'm certain of it," he replied. "Which is why I must insist that we meet in person. Can you come to Reykjavik?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. Could I really drop everything and fly to Iceland on the word of a stranger? But as my eyes drifted to the runestone, now sitting in our living room like some ancient sentinel, I knew I had no choice. "I'll be there," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Give me a few days to make arrangements." As I hung up the phone, my mother entered the room, her face etched with concern. "Freya, what's going on? Who were you talking to?" I took a deep breath, trying to figure out how to explain the bizarre turn of events. "Mom, you might want to sit down for this." Over the next hour, I recounted my conversation with Professor Magnusson and his theories about the runestone and the lost manuscripts. As I spoke, I could see the doubt in my mother's eyes slowly give way to a mix of fear and excitement. "But Freya," she said when I'd finished, "this sounds dangerous. And how do you know you can trust this professor?" I shook my head, struggling to find the words to express the certainty I felt. "I can't explain it, Mom, but I know this is important. It's like I've been waiting for this my whole life without even knowing it." My mother was silent for a long moment, her gaze drifting to the runestone. Finally, she sighed and reached for my hand. "There's something I need to tell you, Freya. Something about our family that I've never shared before." My breath caught in my throat. "What is it?" "Your grandfather, he always claimed that our family had a special connection to Snorri Sturluson. I never believed him. I thought it was just an old man's fancy. But now, with this rune stone and this professor..." She trailed off, her eyes distant. "Mom," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "What kind of connection?" She squeezed my hand, her eyes refocusing on me with an intensity I'd never seen before. "He said we were descendants, Freya. Direct descendants of Snorri Sturluson himself." The world seemed to tilt on its axis as the implications of her words sank in. If what she said was true, then this wasn't just an academic pursuit or an adventure. It was my heritage, my birthright. As if in response to this revelation, the runestone seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. I stood, drawn to it as if by some unseen force. As my fingers traced the carved symbols, I felt a jolt of electricity course through my body. "I have to go to Iceland, Mom," I said, my voice filled with a newfound determination. "I have to find out the truth." She nodded, resignation and pride warring in her expression. "I know, sweetheart. Just be careful. There's no telling what you might uncover." As I turned away to start packing, movement outside the window caught my eye. A figure in a dark coat was hurrying away from our house, their face obscured by a low-brimmed hat. My heart raced as I realized the implications. Someone had been watching us, listening in on our conversation. "Mom," I said, my voice tight with sudden fear. "I think we're being followed." She rushed to the window, but the figure had already disappeared around the corner. We exchanged a worried glance, the weight of our discovery and the dangers it might bring suddenly very real. "Pack quickly," she said, her voice low and urgent. "We need to get you to the airport as soon as possible." As I rushed upstairs to throw clothes into a suitcase, my mind whirled with questions and possibilities. Who was following us? What secrets did the lost manuscripts hold? And most importantly, was I ready for the journey that lay ahead? One thing was certain: my life would never be the same. The call of the North had sounded, and I had no choice but to answer. The icy wind bit at my face as I stepped out of Keflavik International Airport, my breath forming small clouds in the crisp Icelandic air. Despite the chill, excitement coursed through my veins. I was here, in Reykjavik, ready to uncover the secrets of the Prose Edda and my family's mysterious connection to Snorri Sturluson. As I hailed a taxi, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had followed me since leaving home. The memory of that shadowy figure watching our house lingered in my mind. "Where to, miss?" the taxi driver asked, his accent thick but friendly. "The Hotel Saga, please," I replied, settling into the back seat with my small suitcase. As we drove through the outskirts of Reykjavik, I marveled at the stark beauty of the landscape. Volcanic rocks and moss-covered fields stretched as far as the eye could see, occasionally interrupted by modern buildings that seemed almost alien against the ancient terrain. Upon reaching the hotel, I quickly checked in and made my way to my room. I had arranged to meet Professor Magnusson in the hotel lobby at 3 p.m., which gave me just enough time to freshen up and gather my thoughts. At precisely 3 p.m., I descended to the lobby, my heart racing with anticipation. I scanned the area, looking for anyone who might fit the description of an eccentric professor obsessed with Norse mythology. But as the minutes ticked by, there was no sign of Professor Magnusson. After half an hour of waiting, I approached the front desk. "Excuse me," I said to the receptionist. I'm supposed to be meeting a Professor Eric Magnuson. Has he left any messages for me? The receptionist checked her computer and shook her head. I'm sorry, miss. There are no messages for you, and we don't have anyone by that name registered at the hotel. A cold dread settled in the pit of my stomach. Something was wrong. I spent the next few hours calling every hotel in Reykjavik, but none had any record of a Professor Magnuson. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. As night fell, I found myself wandering the streets of Reykjavik, my mind racing with possibilities and fears. Lost in thought, I barely noticed when I bumped into someone on the narrow sidewalk. "Oh, I'm so sorry," I stammered, looking up to see a young woman with piercing blue eyes and a mane of wild red hair. She smiled, her expression curious. "No harm done. You look a bit lost. Are you okay?" There was something about her open, friendly face that made me want to confide in her. "Actually, I'm looking for someone, a professor who was supposed to meet me, but he's disappeared." The woman's eyebrows shot up. "A missing professor? That sounds like the beginning of a good mystery. I'm Sigrid, by the way, local tour guide and amateur historian." "Freya," I replied, shaking her hand. "And you have no idea how right you are about the mystery part." Over cups of strong coffee in a nearby cafe, I found myself pouring out the whole story to Sigrid: the runestone, the letter, the connection to Snorri Sturluson, and the vanishing professor. Sigrid listened intently, her eyes growing wider with each revelation. When I finished, she leaned in close, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Freya, what you're talking about, it's not just history, it's legend. There have always been whispers about hidden knowledge in this city, secrets passed down from the time of the Vikings." She glanced around the cafe as if checking for eavesdroppers, then continued. "There's a network of tunnels beneath Reykjavik. Most people think they're just old sewers or wartime bunkers, but some of us believe they're much older and hold much darker secrets." My heart raced at her words. "Do you think the professor might have gone down there?" Sigrid nodded slowly. "It's possible. If he was looking for ancient knowledge, that's where I'd start." "Can you show me?" I asked, barely able to contain my excitement. Sigrid hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Meet me at the old harbor at midnight. And Freya, be careful who you trust." The hours until midnight crawled by. I returned to my hotel room, double-checked my backpack, and tried to calm my nerves. As the appointed time approached, I made my way to the old harbor, the sound of the waves lapping against the shore a soothing counterpoint to my racing thoughts. Sigrid appeared out of the darkness like a ghost, her red hair hidden beneath a dark hood. Without a word, she gestured for me to follow her. We wound our way through narrow alleys and abandoned lots until we reached a dilapidated warehouse. "Here," Sigrid whispered, pulling aside a rusted sheet of metal to reveal a dark opening. "Watch your step." We descended into the earth, the beam of Sigrid's flashlight our only guide. The air grew thick and damp, carrying the musty scent of ages past. After what seemed like hours of twisting passages, we emerged into a larger chamber. "By the gods," Sigrid breathed, her flashlight beam dancing across the walls. The chamber was covered in intricate carvings, runes, figures from Norse mythology, and complex geometric patterns that seemed to shift and move in the flickering light. As we examined the carvings, my flashlight beam caught something on the far wall. "Sigrid, look at this." It was a map, etched into the stone itself. At its center was Iceland, but off to the side, barely visible, was a small island I had never seen on any modern map. "That's it," I whispered, my finger tracing the outline of the mysterious island. "That's where the manuscripts must be hidden." Just then a voice echoed through the chamber, causing us both to jump. Well, well, what do we have here?" I spun around to see a man emerging from the shadows. He was tall and lean, with sharp features and cold, calculating eyes. "Dr. Erickson," Sigrid hissed, her voice filled with contempt. The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Ms. Larson, I presume. I've been looking forward to meeting you." "Who are you?" I demanded, trying to keep the fear out of my voice. "Dr. Anders Ericsson, archaeologist and historian, and you, my dear, are meddling in things you don't understand." He took a step closer, his gaze fixed on the map behind us. "I'm going to give you one chance to walk away from this. Forget about Snorri Sturluson, forget about the lost manuscripts. Go home and live your life." I stood my ground, anger replacing fear. "And if I refuse?" His smile turned cruel. "Then I'm afraid things will become unpleasant for you." Before I could respond, Sigrid grabbed my arm. "Run!" We bolted down one of the tunnels, the sound of Ericsson's angry shouts echoing behind us. After a dizzying series of turns, we emerged back onto the streets of Reykjavik, gasping for air. "We need to get to that island," I panted, my mind reeling from the encounter. Sigrid nodded, her face grim. "I know someone with a boat. But Freya, are you sure about this? Ericsson is dangerous." I thought of the runestone, of my family's connection to Snorri Sturluson, of the vanished professor. "I'm sure. Whatever's on that island, it's too important to let someone like Ericsson get his hands on it." Within hours, we were at the docks, boarding a small fishing boat captained by one of Sigrid's friends. As we set sail into the North Atlantic, dark clouds began to gather on the horizon. "Storm's coming," the captain growled, his weathered face creased with concern. "Might be a rough ride." As if in response to his words, the wind picked up, and the first drops of rain began to fall. The small boat pitched and rolled in the increasingly choppy seas. I clung to the railing, my knuckles white, as waves crashed over the deck. Through the spray and rain, I caught a glimpse of something in the distance, a dark shape looming out of the mist. "There," I shouted over the howling wind. "I think I see the island." But as I pointed, a massive wave slammed into the boat, nearly capsizing us. I lost my footing, sliding across the deck towards the churning sea. Sigrid's hand shot out, grabbing my wrist at the last moment. "Hold on," she yelled, straining to pull me back. As I dangled over the raging ocean, the wind and rain lashing at my face, I realized that this was only the beginning. Whatever secrets lay hidden on that island, they wouldn't give themselves up without a fight. With a surge of determination, I grabbed Sigrid's arm with my free hand, pulling myself back onto the deck. As I lay there, gasping and soaked to the bone, I knew there was no turning back now. The roar of the waves and the howling wind gradually faded, replaced by the gentle lapping of water against sand and the distant cry of seabirds. I opened my eyes, blinking against the harsh light of day. My entire body ached, and my clothes were stiff with dried salt. "Sigrid?" I croaked, pushing myself up on my elbows. "Captain?" A groan to my left answered me. Sigrid was sprawled on the beach a few feet away, her red hair matted with sand and seaweed. Of the captain or his boat there was no sign. "We made it," Sigrid mumbled, sitting up slowly. "Though I'm not sure I'd call this making it." I looked around, taking in our surroundings. We were on a narrow strip of black sand beach, bordered on one side by steep cliffs and on the other by the churning sea. A thick mist hung over everything, obscuring the island's interior. "Our supplies?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Sigrid shook her head. "Gone, along with the boat and the captain, it seems." We spent the next hour combing the beach, hoping to find something, anything, that might have washed up with us. But apart from a few pieces of driftwood and some tangled fishing net, the sea had claimed everything. "We can't stay here," I said, eyeing the cliffs. "We need to find fresh water and shelter." Sigrid nodded, her face grim. "And hope we don't run into Dr. Ericsson. I'd bet my last krona he's not far behind us." We found a narrow path leading up the cliffs and began our ascent. The climb was treacherous, the rocks slick with sea spray and moss. More than once we nearly lost our footing, saved only by desperate grabs at hardy plants clinging to the cliff face. As we neared the top, the mist began to thin. Pulling ourselves over the edge, we found ourselves on a grassy plateau. And there, looming out of the mist, like a vision from the past, were the unmistakable remains of an ancient Norse settlement. By the gods, Sigrid breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. Stone foundations formed the outlines of longhouses and smaller outbuildings. In the center of the settlement stood a large circular structure, its walls still partially intact. "A thing," I said, recognizing the ancient assembly place. This must have been an important settlement. As we wandered through the ruins, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The mist seemed to play tricks on my eyes, creating shadowy figures that vanished when I turned to look at them directly. "Sigrid," I whispered, "does something feel off to you?" She nodded, her hand straying to the small knife at her belt. "Like we're not alone." We approached the thing cautiously. Its stone walls were covered in intricate carvings worn by time but still visible. As we circled the structure, I noticed something odd about one section of the wall. "Look at this," I called to Sigrid. "The stones here don't quite match the others." Upon closer inspection, we could see that this section of wall was actually a cleverly disguised door. With some effort, we managed to push it open, revealing a dark passage leading down into the earth. "Should we?" Sigrid asked, peering into the darkness. I pulled out my phone, relieved to find it still worked despite its dunking in the sea. The flashlight function cast a weak glow into the passage. "We've come too far to turn back now," I said, stepping into the darkness. The passage led us deep underground, opening eventually into a large chamber. As our lights played across the walls, we gasped in unison. Every inch of the chamber was covered in runes and symbols, more intricate and numerous than anything I'd ever seen. "This is incredible," I breathed, running my hand over the carved stone. "Some of these runes, I've never seen anything like them." Sigrid was examining a large stone table in the center of the room. "Freya, look at this. It's some kind of map, but not like any I've ever seen." I joined her at the table. The surface was indeed carved with what looked like a map, but instead of land masses and oceans, it showed a complex web of lines and symbols. "It's not a map of places," I realized, tracing one of the lines. "It's a map of knowledge. Each line must represent a branch of learning or a collection of stories." As we bent over the map, trying to decipher its meaning, a noise from the passage made us both freeze. Footsteps, and the murmur of voices. "Quick, hide," Sigrid hissed, pulling me behind a large stone pillar. We held our breath as a group of people entered the chamber. They were dressed in a strange mix of modern and ancient clothing, carrying torches and what looked like old-fashioned weapons. "The signs are clear," one of them, an older man with a long gray beard, was saying. "Outsiders have come to the island. The ancient prophecy is unfolding." "But Elder," a younger woman protested, "how can we be sure these are the ones spoken of in the texts?" The old man turned, his torch illuminating a section of wall near where we hid. "The runes do not lie, Astrid. The Keeper of Stories has returned, and with her, the potential for great change or great destruction." I shifted slightly, trying to get a better view, and knocked loose a small stone. The sound echoed in the chamber like a gunshot. "Intruders!" someone shouted. "Find them!" "Run!" Sigrid yelled, grabbing my hand. We bolted for the passage, the shouts of our pursuers close behind. We emerged from the thing into the misty daylight, running blindly through the ruins. "This way!" I called, spotting a gap in the rocks that looked like it might lead away from the settlement. We squeezed through the opening, finding ourselves on a narrow path that wound down the far side of the plateau. Behind us, we could hear the islanders spreading out, searching for us. "Who were those people?" Sigrid panted as we ran. "And what were they talking about?" "I don't know," I gasped. "But I think we just found out why this island isn't on any modern maps." We ran until our lungs burned, the path taking us down into a dense forest. The trees here were ancient, their gnarled branches reaching out like grasping hands in the mist. As we paused to catch our breath, a sound caught my attention, the faint trickle of water. "Do you hear that?" I asked Sigrid. There must be a stream nearby. We followed the sound, pushing through thick underbrush until we came to a small clearing. A stream bubbled up from between some rocks, forming a clear pool before continuing down the slope. As we gratefully scooped up handfuls of the cool water, I noticed something odd about the rocks surrounding the spring. They weren't natural formations, but carved stones arranged in a deliberate pattern. "Sigrid, look at this," I said, brushing away some moss to reveal more carved runes. "It's some kind of, doorway?" As if in response to my touch, there was a grinding sound, and a section of the rock face swung inward, revealing a dark opening. "A cave," Sigrid whispered, her eyes wide. "But where does it lead?" The sound of distant voices made us both tense. Our pursuers were getting closer. "I don't think we have much choice," I said, peering into the darkness. "Whatever's down there, it's got to be better than facing those islanders again." Sigrid nodded grimly. "Into the unknown we go, then." With one last look at the misty forest behind us, we stepped into the cave. The stone door swung shut behind us with a final sounding thud, plunging us into darkness. As we switched on our phone flashlights, illuminating a rough-hewn passage leading deep into the earth, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were crossing a threshold, not just physically, but into a world of ancient secrets and forgotten knowledge. "The keeper of stories," I murmured, remembering the old man's words. What did he mean by that? Sigrid shrugged, her face pale in the harsh light of our phones. "I don't know, but I have a feeling we're about to find out." With no way back and unknown dangers ahead, we began our descent into the heart of the island, each step taking us deeper into a mystery that had waited centuries to be unraveled. The darkness of the cave pressed in around us, broken only by the weak beams of our phone flashlights. The air was thick with the scent of damp stone and something older, more primordial. "We should have brought proper torches," Sigrid muttered, her voice echoing slightly in the narrow passage. I nodded, then realized she probably couldn't see the gesture. "Agreed. But at least we have some light. Let's hope our batteries last." We moved cautiously through the twisting passages, our lights revealing glimpses of rough-hewn walls adorned with faded carvings. The floor was slick with moisture, and more than once we nearly lost our footing on the uneven surface. After what felt like hours of walking, we emerged into a larger chamber. Our lights barely reached the distant walls, giving the impression of a vast, cavernous space. "Look," Sigrid said, pointing to the far end of the chamber. "Is that firelight?" Sure enough, a faint orange glow flickered in the distance. We approached cautiously, ready to duck out of sight at the first sign of the hostile islanders. But as we drew closer, we saw that the light came from a series of ancient-looking torches set into the wall. How are these still burning after all this time? I wondered aloud, examining one of the torches. Sigrid shrugged, a look of unease on her face. "Magic? Or maybe they're not as old as they appear. Either way, I don't like it." With the torches providing better illumination, we could now see that the chamber was dotted with stone pillars, each carved with intricate runes and symbols. At the center stood a massive stone door, its surface covered in what looked like writing. As we approached the door, I felt a strange tingling sensation, as if the very air was charged with an ancient power. I reached out to touch the carved surface, and the words seemed to shimmer under my fingertips. "It's a riddle," I breathed, tracing the lines of text. "Listen to this. I am the keeper of tales untold, of gods and giants, of heroes bold. Speak my name and the way you'll find, but beware the price of knowledge unkind." Sigrid frowned. "A riddle? But what's the answer?" I stood there, my mind racing. The keeper of tales, gods and giants. It had to be related to Norse mythology. And then it hit me. "Bragi," I said firmly, "the god of poetry and storytelling in Norse mythology." For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a grinding of stone on stone, the massive door began to swing open. "How did you know that?" Sigrid asked, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and suspicion. I shook my head, a little dazed myself. I'm not sure. It just came to me, like I'd always known it. As we stepped through the doorway, we found ourselves in a long corridor lined with more doors, each bearing its own riddle. Looks like we've got our work cut out for us, Sigrid said, eyeing the numerous doors. We moved from door to door, each riddle more challenging than the last. Some referenced obscure Norse myths, others required knowledge of ancient runes or complex wordplay. With each solved riddle, I felt a growing sense of unease. The answers were coming to me too easily, as if some hidden part of my mind was awakening. Sigrid, I said as we approached yet another door. Doesn't this seem a bit convenient? Like these riddles were made for me to solve? She nodded slowly. I've been thinking the same thing. It's almost as if... Her words were cut off by a deep rumbling sound. The ground beneath our feet began to shake violently. Earthquake! Sigrid shouted. We need to get out of here. We turned to run, but a massive chunk of the ceiling came crashing down between us, cutting off our escape route. Freya! I heard Sigrid call from the other side of the rockfall. Are you okay? I'm fine, I shouted back. But I can't get through. You need to find another way around. I'll try to circle back, her muffled voice replied. Stay where you are. But even as she spoke, I could feel the floor beneath me starting to give way. With a sickening lurch, it collapsed entirely, sending me tumbling into darkness. I landed hard on a sloping surface, sliding uncontrollably through pitch blackness. Just when I thought the fall would never end, I splashed into cold water, the shock driving the air from my lungs. Gasping and sputtering, I managed to drag myself onto a narrow stone ledge. My phone was gone, lost in the fall or the water. In the complete darkness, I felt utterly alone and terrified. Hello? I called out, my voice small and quavering in the vast space. Is anyone there? To my shock, a voice answered, not Sigrid's, but one that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Greetings, keeper of stories, the voice said, its tone neither male nor female, young nor old. Long have we awaited your return. A pale, shimmering light began to grow in the center of the chamber, gradually taking on a vaguely humanoid shape. It was like looking at a person made of mist and moonlight. What are you? I asked, my heart pounding. The figure seemed to smile, though it had no discernible face. I am a guardian, a keeper of knowledge, much like yourself, though you do not yet understand the full extent of your role. My role? What are you talking about, and where's Sigrid? Your friend is safe, for now, the figure said, but your path lies elsewhere. Tell me, what do you know of the Prose Edda? I blinked, thrown by the sudden change of subject. It's a collection of Norse myths and legends, written by Snorri Sturluson in the 13th century. But what does that have to do with anything? The spectral figure began to move, circling me slowly. The Prose Edda is more than just stories, young keeper. It is a key to power beyond imagining, and you, with your bloodline, are destined to unlock its secrets. Bloodline? You mean my family's connection to Snorri Sturluson? I asked, struggling to keep up. Indeed, but the connection goes deeper than you know. Listen well. In lines of blood and ink entwined, the power of words you'll surely find. But heed this warning clear and true. What once was hidden now seeks you. Before I could ask what the riddle meant, the figure began to fade. Wait, I called out. I don't understand. But the spectral form had already disappeared, leaving me alone in the darkness once more. As if on cue, I heard Sigrid's voice echoing from a nearby passage. Freya, can you hear me? Over here, I shouted back, relief flooding through me. Moments later, Sigrid appeared, her flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. She helped me to my feet, her face etched with concern. Are you all right? What happened? I opened my mouth to tell her about the spectral figure and its cryptic message, but before I could speak, we both became aware of a new sound, the rush of water. Oh no, Sigrid breathed, her flashlight beam revealing a steadily rising water level at our feet. We scrambled to higher ground, but it quickly became apparent that the entire chamber was filling with water. The earthquake must have damaged some underground reservoir or redirected an underwater stream. There, I pointed to a small opening high up on one wall. If we can reach that, we might be able to escape. We began to climb, using the rough cave walls as handholds. The water rose steadily behind us, lapping at our heels with each passing moment. As we neared the opening, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was all part of some greater test. The spectral figure's words echoed in my mind. What once was hidden, now seeks you. Sigrid, I gasped as we pulled ourselves through the narrow opening, the water mere inches behind us. I think there's more going on here than we realized. This isn't just about finding lost manuscripts, it's about awakening something powerful and ancient. Sigrid looked at me, her eyes wide in the dim light. What are you saying, Freya? I took a deep breath, trying to put my swirling thoughts into words. I'm saying that we might be in over our heads, literally and figuratively. But I also think we're meant to be here, that I'm meant to uncover whatever secrets are hidden in this place. As if in response to my words, the passage ahead of us suddenly illuminated, revealing a new chamber filled with ancient texts and artifacts. Well, Sigrid said, a hint of nervous laughter in her voice. I guess there's only one way to find out. Shall we? With the sound of rushing water at our backs and the promise of ancient knowledge before us, we stepped into the illuminated chamber, ready to face whatever challenges and revelations awaited us. Gasping for air, Sigrid and I stumbled into a vast underground hall, the roar of the flooding chamber fading behind us as a hidden door slid shut. We stood there for a moment, dripping wet and trying to catch our breath as our eyes adjusted to the dim light. The hall was enormous, its ceiling lost in shadows high above us. Massive stone columns lined the walls, each carved with intricate runes and scenes from Norse mythology. At the far end, barely visible in the gloom, stood a colossal statue of what appeared to be Odin, the All-Father of Norse gods. This is incredible, Sigrid breathed, her voice filled with awe. I nodded, still too winded to speak. As we took in the majesty of our surroundings, a deep, resonant voice suddenly boomed throughout the chamber, seeming to come from everywhere at once. Who dares enter the Hall of Trials? The voice was so loud it made the ground beneath our feet vibrate. Sigrid and I instinctively huddled closer together. We seek knowledge, I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. Knowledge of the Prose Edda and the secrets it holds. There was a moment of silence, then the voice spoke again, slightly less thunderous this time. Knowledge comes at a price, Seeker. Are you willing to pay it? I glanced at Sigrid, who gave me a small nod of encouragement. We are, I replied. Then prove your worth. Face the trials of strength and wit. Only the worthy may pass. As the voice faded, the hall began to transform. The floor shifted and rose in places, creating a complex landscape of obstacles and challenges. I guess we don't have much choice, Sigrid said, eyeing the newly formed course before us. We set off, navigating through a series of physical challenges that tested our strength, agility, and endurance. We climbed sheer rock walls, leaped across chasms, and squeezed through narrow passages. Each obstacle seemed designed to push us to our limits. As we neared what appeared to be the end of the physical trials, I turned to Sigrid, panting. You know, I'm starting to think those yoga classes weren't such a waste of time after all. She managed a weak laugh. Speak for yourself. I'm pretty sure I've pulled muscles I didn't even know I had. But our relief was short-lived. As we stepped onto a large circular platform, the voice boomed again. The body has been tested. Now, the mind must prove its mettle. Suddenly, the air around me shimmered and warped. Sigrid vanished from my side, and I found myself alone in what looked like a dimly lit library. Bookshelves towered around me, stretching impossibly high. "Sigrid?" I called out, my voice echoing strangely in the vast space. There was no answer. As I turned, trying to get my bearings, I noticed something odd about the books. Their titles were constantly shifting, changing languages and alphabets faster than I could read them. And then I realized with a chill that the books were whispering. Thousands of voices murmured from the shelves, speaking in languages both familiar and utterly alien. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, until they were a deafening cacophony of sound. "Stop," I cried, covering my ears. But the voices were inside my head now, drowning out my thoughts. In that moment I understood. This was a test of my deepest fears, the fear of losing myself in the very knowledge I sought, of being overwhelmed by the weight of ancient secrets. I forced myself to take a deep breath, focusing on the reason I had come here in the first place. "I am the keeper of stories," I said aloud, my voice growing stronger with each word. "I do not fear knowledge, I embrace it." As I spoke, I felt a shift in the air around me. The whispers began to fade, and the library dissolved like mist in sunlight. I found myself back on the platform, Sigrid at my side, looking shaken. "Did you—" I began. She nodded. "Yeah, it was like being trapped in an endless battlefield. The clash of swords, the screams of the dying. It was my worst nightmare come to life." I squeezed her hand. "But we made it through." Before we could say more, the platform we were standing on began to move, carrying us towards the base of the Odin statue. As we drew closer, we could see that the statue's chest was covered in an intricate array of symbols and moving parts, a massive, three-dimensional puzzle. "Solve the riddle of the ages," the voice commanded. "Unlock the wisdom of the ancients." Sigrid and I approached the puzzle, studying its complex mechanism. It appeared to be a combination of runes, astronomical symbols, and interlocking gears. "Okay," I said, trying to make sense of the symbols. "I think these runes represent different Norse gods and their attributes. And these," I pointed to a series of concentric circles, "look like the branches of Yggdrasil, the world tree." Sigrid nodded, her brow furrowed in concentration. "And see how these gears interlock? I bet we need to align them in a specific way to make the whole thing work." We set to work, piecing together the puzzle bit by bit. It was slow, painstaking work, with each solved section revealing new complexities. Hours seemed to pass as we worked, our fingers becoming numb from manipulating the cold metal pieces. Finally, with a satisfying click, the last piece fell into place. The entire mechanism began to glow with an inner light, and the statue of Odin slowly moved aside, revealing a hidden passage. "We did it," Sigrid breathed, a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration in her voice. I nodded, too tired to speak. We had passed the trials, but at what cost? My mind felt raw from the psychic assault in the library illusion, and my body ached from the physical challenges. As we stepped towards the newly revealed passage, the voice spoke one last time. "You have proven yourselves worthy, seekers. But remember, the greatest trial still lies ahead." With those ominous words echoing in our ears, we entered the dark passage. We had taken only a few steps when I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. "Sigrid, watch out," I cried, but it was too late. The floor gave way entirely, and we were falling, tumbling through darkness. I reached out blindly, managing to grasp Sigrid's hand as we plummeted into the unknown. The fall seemed to last an eternity. Wind rushed past us, and I could hear Sigrid's terrified scream mingling with my own. Just as I was sure we were about to meet a gruesome end, our descent began to slow as if we were falling through water rather than air. We landed softly on what felt like a bed of moss, the impact far gentler than it should have been given the length of our fall. For a moment we lay there in total darkness, our ragged breathing the only sound. "Freya?" Sigrid's voice came weakly from beside me. "Are you okay?" "I think so," I replied, slowly sitting up and taking stock of my body. Nothing seemed to be broken. You? Same. But where are we? As if in answer to her question, a soft light began to grow around us. We found ourselves in a small circular chamber, its walls covered in luminescent moss that gave off a pale blue-green glow. At the center of the chamber stood a pedestal, and on it rested a book that seemed to radiate power. Its cover was made of some dark, iridescent material that shifted and swirled as we watched. "Is that?" Sigrid whispered, her eyes wide. I nodded, a mixture of excitement and trepidation filling me. "I think it's the Prose Edda, or at least a version of it we've never seen before." As we approached the pedestal, I could feel the book calling to me, its secrets yearning to be unlocked. But I hesitated, remembering the warning voice's final words. "The greatest trial still lies ahead," I murmured. Sigrid looked at me, her face serious in the eerie light. "Whatever happens next, we face it together, right?" I took a deep breath and nodded. Together. With trembling hands, I reached out and opened the book, unleashing whatever ancient power it contained. As the pages began to turn of their own accord, filling the chamber with a blinding light, I realized that our journey was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning. The blinding light faded and I found myself lying on a cold stone floor, my head throbbing. As I blinked away the spots dancing in my vision, I realized we were in an entirely new place. Towering bookshelves surrounded us, stretching up into shadows so deep I couldn't see where they ended. "Sigrid?" I called out, my voice hoarse. "Over here," came her reply from somewhere to my left. I turned to see her pulling herself up, using one of the bookshelves for support. "Are you okay?" I nodded, slowly getting to my feet. "I think so. Where are we?" As our eyes adjusted to the dim light, we began to take in our surroundings. We were in an enormous library, unlike anything I'd ever seen. The air was thick with the scent of old parchment and leather. Dust motes danced in shafts of light that seemed to have no source. "Look at these," Sigrid breathed, reaching out to touch one of the books. "They're all in Old Norse, and some of these look even older." I moved to join her, my academic excitement overriding my lingering disorientation. The books were indeed ancient, their spines cracked and worn with age. As I ran my fingers along the shelves, I felt a jolt of recognition. "Sigrid, these aren't just any manuscripts. These are lost works we've only heard rumors about. Look, here's the complete saga of Harold Fairhair, and over there, is that the original Völuspá?" We moved through the library in a daze, each shelf revealing new treasures. But it was a small, unassuming, leather-bound journal tucked away in a corner that caught my eye. "What's this?" I murmured, carefully opening the fragile book. As I read the first page, I gasped. "Sigrid, you're not going to believe this. It's Snorri Sturluson's personal journal." Sigrid hurried over, her eyes wide. "Are you serious? That's impossible. All of Snorri's personal writings were thought to be lost centuries ago." I nodded, my hands shaking slightly as I turned the pages. "I know, but this is definitely his handwriting. And listen to this. I write these words in secret, for the knowledge I have uncovered must never fall into the wrong hands. The Prose Edda is more than a collection of stories. It is a key to power beyond mortal comprehension. I have taken steps to protect this knowledge, scattering clues across the land and sea. Only one of my own blood, with a pure heart and keen mind, can hope to unravel the mystery." Sigrid let out a low whistle. "So the Prose Edda really is more than just myths and legends, but what kind of power is he talking about?" I continued reading, my excitement growing with each revelation. According to this, Snorri discovered that the Norse gods were more than just stories. They were based on real beings, incredibly powerful and long-lived but not truly immortal, and the Prose Edda contains the secret to accessing their power. That's incredible," Sigrid said, her voice a mixture of awe and skepticism. "But if it's true, why would Snorri want to hide this knowledge?" I flipped through more pages, skimming rapidly. "He says it's too dangerous. In the wrong hands, this power could reshape the world, overthrow kingdoms, even potentially bring about Ragnarok itself. As we pored over the journal, piecing together Snorri's secret quest, a low rumbling sound filled the library. At first, I thought it was just the settling of the ancient structure around us, but then I saw a movement out of the corner of my eye. "Sigrid," I whispered, slowly looking up. "Don't make any sudden moves." She followed my gaze and froze. The statues that lined the walls of the library, representations of Norse gods and heroes, were moving. Stone ground against stone as they stepped down from their pedestals, their blank eyes fixed on us. "What do we do?" Sigrid hissed, slowly backing away. I clutched Snorri's journal to my chest, my mind racing. "The runes," I said, remembering details from the journal. Snorri mentioned protective runes. Look for markings on the floor or walls. We split up, frantically searching the library as the stone figures advanced. Their movements were slow but relentless, the sound of their footsteps echoing ominously through the cavernous space. "Here," Sigrid called out. She was standing by a section of wall covered in intricate runic inscriptions. "But I can't read them." I rushed over, the animated statues closing in behind us. My eyes darted over the runes, my mind connecting them to passages I'd read in Snorri's journal. "Protection, binding, reveal," I muttered, tracing the shapes with my finger. As I spoke the final word, the runes began to glow with a soft blue light. A shimmering barrier sprang up between us and the statues. They pressed against it, their stone faces twisting in silent fury, but they couldn't break through. "That was too close," Sigrid said, leaning against the wall and catching her breath. I nodded, my heart still racing. But why would Snorri set up such dangerous protections? What was he so afraid of? Returning to the journal, I read on, my brow furrowing as I uncovered a tale of betrayal and deceit that stretched back to Snorri's own time. "According to this," I said, my voice tight with disbelief, "Snorri wasn't working alone. He was part of a secret society dedicated to protecting the knowledge of the Norse gods. But one of their own betrayed them, trying to use the power for himself." Sigrid leaned in, her eyes wide. "Who was it?" I swallowed hard, the implications hitting me like a physical blow. "It was Sturla Thordarson, Snorri's own nephew. The man history remembers as Snorri's faithful biographer was actually responsible for his death." "But that changes everything we know about that period of history," Sigrid breathed. I nodded grimly. "And it explains why Snorri went to such lengths to hide and protect this knowledge. He knew Sturla would stop at nothing to get it." As we digested this earth-shattering revelation, a new sound reached our ears, the grinding of stone on stone, but much louder than before. "The barrier won't hold forever," I said, looking nervously at the straining statues. "We need to find a way out of here." We gathered as many manuscripts as we could carry, including Snorri's journal, and began searching for an exit. But as we moved through the library, the very walls seemed to shift and change around us. "It's like a labyrinth," Sigrid said, frustration evident in her voice. "How are we supposed to find our way out if the paths keep changing?" I was about to respond when a violent tremor shook the cavern. Dust and small rocks rained down from the ceiling. "The whole place is coming down!" I shouted over the rumbling. "Run!" We sprinted through the shifting corridors, the sound of collapsing stone growing louder behind us. Just when it seemed we were hopelessly lost, I spotted a faint glow ahead. "There," I pointed. "I think that's our way out." As we raced towards the light, I could feel the floor crumbling beneath our feet. With a final desperate leap, we threw ourselves through the opening, tumbling onto solid ground as the library collapsed behind us. We lay there for a moment, gasping for breath, the manuscripts clutched tightly to our chests. When I finally looked up, I realized we were back in the original cave system, near where we'd first entered. "We made it," Sigrid said, her voice weak with relief. I nodded, still trying to process everything we'd learned. "But this is just the beginning, isn't it? Now that we know the truth about the Prose Edda, about Snorri's quest?" Sigrid sat up, her face serious. We have a responsibility to protect this knowledge, just like Snorri did. And to stop anyone who might try to misuse it, I added, thinking of Dr. Erickson and whoever else might be after these secrets. As we gathered ourselves and prepared to leave the cave, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had set something in motion, something bigger than either of us could imagine. The echoes of the past were reaching into the present, and the fate of the future might well rest in our hands. Whatever comes next, I said, meeting Sigrid's determined gaze, we face it together. She nodded, a small smile on her face despite the gravity of our situation. Together. Now let's get out of here and figure out our next move. The cave's exit loomed before us, a sliver of daylight growing larger with each stumbling step. Behind us, the rumble of collapsing stone grew louder, spurring us on despite our exhaustion. Almost there, I shouted to Sigrid over the din, clutching the precious manuscripts to my chest. With a final burst of speed, we burst out of the cave mouth, the force of our momentum carrying us several steps onto a narrow ledge. We turned just in time to see the entrance collapse in a cloud of dust and debris. That was too close, Sigrid panted, hands on her knees as she caught her breath. I nodded, unable to speak for a moment as I gulped in the crisp, salty air. We were on a cliff face high above the sea, waves crashing against the rocks far below. The wind whipped around us, carrying a biting chill that cut through our damp clothes. As the adrenaline of our escape began to fade, I took stock of our situation. We need to figure out where we are and how to get back to civilization, I said, shielding my eyes against the glare as I scanned the horizon. Sigrid was doing the same, her brow furrowed in concentration. I think I see some kind of structure over there, she said, pointing to a distant outcropping. Maybe a lighthouse or a weather station? I was about to agree when something caught my eye, a flash of movement on a ledge below us. Wait, I said, grabbing Sigrid's arm. We're not alone. We crouched low, peering over the edge of our perch. There, making his way along a treacherous path, was a figure we both recognized immediately. Dr. Erickson, Sigrid hissed, her voice filled with anger and disbelief. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the wind. How did he find us? And how did he get here so quickly? As we watched, Erickson paused, pulling something from his backpack. My heart sank as I recognized the distinctive leather binding of Snorri's journal. He must have gotten to it before the cave collapsed, I said, my mind racing. We have to get it back. That journal is the key to everything. Sigrid nodded grimly. So much for finding a way back to civilization. Looks like we're in for another chase. We began our descent, picking our way carefully along the cliff face. The path was treacherous, slick with sea spray and crumbling in places. More than once we had to backtrack to find a safer route. As we climbed, the wind grew fiercer, howling around us and threatening to tear us from our precarious handholds. Icy pellets of rain began to fall, further complicating our progress. He's heading for that structure we saw, Sigrid called out, pointing ahead through the worsening weather. I squinted through the rain, seeing Erickson's figure disappearing around a bend in the path. We can't let him get away, I shouted back. Who knows what he'll do with that information? We pressed on, our muscles screaming in protest after the ordeals we'd already endured. The rain turned to sleet, coating the rocks in a treacherous layer of ice. Each step became a battle against the elements and our own exhaustion. Finally, we rounded the bend and saw Erickson clearly. He was only 100 yards ahead, struggling against the wind as he approached the structure, which I could now see was indeed an old lighthouse. Dr. Erickson, I called out, my voice nearly lost in the howling gale. Stop. He turned, surprise and then anger flashing across his face as he saw us. For a moment, he seemed to consider standing his ground. Then, with a look of determination, he turned and ran towards the lighthouse. After him! Sigrid yelled, breaking into a run. We gave chase, our feet slipping on the icy rocks. Erickson reached the lighthouse door just as we closed in, fumbling with the lock. "It's over, Erickson," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Give us the journal and we can end this peacefully." He turned to face us, his expression a mixture of desperation and defiance. "You don't understand what's at stake here," he shouted over the wind. "This knowledge, it could change everything, rewrite history as we know it. That's why it needs to be protected," I argued, "not exploited for personal gain." Erickson's face hardened. "Protected? By whom? You? You're just a girl playing at scholar. You have no idea of the forces you're dealing with." Before I could respond, a particularly violent gust of wind hit us. Erickson, standing closer to the edge, lost his footing. With a cry of terror, he toppled backwards, barely managing to grab onto a jutting rock as he fell. "Help me!" he screamed, his legs dangling over the precipice, the journal slipping from his grasp and falling into the churning sea below. For a split second I hesitated. This man had chased us, threatened us, and tried to steal invaluable historical artifacts. But could I really let him fall to his death? "Freya, what are you doing?" Sigrid yelled as I moved towards Erickson. I dropped to my stomach, reaching out to grasp Erickson's wrist. "Hold on," I grunted, straining against his weight. "Sigrid, help me pull him up." Together we managed to haul Erickson back onto solid ground. He lay there for a moment, gasping and shaking. "Why?" he finally managed to ask, looking up at me with confusion in his eyes. I met his gaze steadily. "Because that's not who I am, and it's not what this knowledge is for." As we caught our breath, the lighthouse door creaked open behind us. An old man peered out, his weathered face a mask of surprise. "Well now," he said in heavily accented English, "looks like you folks could use a hand. Come in. Come in. Storm's only going to get worse." Grateful for the shelter, we followed him inside. Over mugs of strong coffee, we explained our situation, or at least a version of it that didn't involve ancient Norse magic and animated statues. The old lighthouse keeper, who introduced himself as Björn, listened with rapt attention. "Quite an adventure you've had," he said when we finished. "I can radio for a boat to take you back to Reykjavik in the morning once this storm passes." As we settled in for the night, I pulled Sigrid aside. "We need to be careful," I whispered. "We still don't know who else might be after this knowledge." She nodded, her expression serious. "And we lost Snorri's journal. How much of a setback is that?" I sighed, running a hand through my tangled hair. "It's a big loss, but not insurmountable. We still have the other manuscripts, and more importantly, we have what we learned. We just need to figure out our next move." The next morning, true to his word, Björn radioed for a boat. As we prepared to leave, I approached Erickson, who had been sullen and quiet since his near-death experience. "What will you do now?" I asked. He looked at me for a long moment before responding. I need to rethink some things. This quest, it's cost me more than I ever imagined it would." I nodded, understanding all too well. "Just be careful. There are forces at work here bigger than any of us." The boat ride back to Reykjavik was uneventful, giving us time to rest and plan. We had arranged for a safe house through contacts of Sigrid's, a place where we could regroup and study the manuscripts we'd managed to save. But as we approached the nondescript apartment building in a quiet part of the city, we knew immediately that something was wrong. The door was ajar, hanging off its hinges. "Stay behind me," Sigrid whispered, her body tense as we entered. The apartment was a disaster. Furniture overturned, papers strewn everywhere, and most alarmingly, no sign of Sigrid's contacts who were supposed to meet us here. "They're gone," I said, my voice hollow as I surveyed the destruction. "And look, the manuscripts are missing too." Sigrid cursed under her breath, quickly checking the other rooms. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were looking for, but how? Who else knew about this place? I shook my head, a feeling of dread settling over me. "I don't know. But this is bigger than we thought, Sigrid. Someone is always one step ahead of us." As we stood in the ransacked apartment, the weight of our situation truly hit me. We were up against unknown forces, racing against time to protect knowledge that could reshape the world. And now, we were back to square one, with no allies and no safe haven. What do we do now? Sigrid asked, voicing the question that was foremost in both our minds. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing thoughts. We keep going. We find new allies, track down more clues. Whatever it takes. Sigrid nodded, a determined glint in her eye. Together? Together, I affirmed, managing a small smile despite our dire circumstances. As we left the apartment, stepping back onto the streets of Reykjavik, I couldn't shake the feeling that our real journey was only just beginning. The soft glow of the laptop screen illuminated our tired faces as Sigrid and I pored over digital copies of the manuscripts we had managed to photograph before they were stolen. We had been working non-stop for days, holed up in a small, nondescript hotel room on the outskirts of Reykjavik. There has to be something here, I muttered, rubbing my eyes. Some clue we've missed. Sigrid leaned back in her chair, stretching. Maybe we're looking at this all wrong. Snorri was clever. He wouldn't have made it easy to find. As I scrolled through another page of dense Old Norse text, something caught my eye. A series of runes that didn't quite fit with the rest of the passage. Wait a second, I said, sitting up straighter. Look at this. Sigrid leaned in, her brow furrowed. It looks like gibberish. Not gibberish, I said, excitement building in my voice. It's a code. See how these runes are slightly different from the others? They're not meant to be read as part of the text. We spent the next few hours decoding the hidden message, our fatigue forgotten in the thrill of discovery. As the first rays of dawn crept through the window, we sat back, staring at the translated message in awe. Beneath the frozen tears of Audumla lies the ship of secrets, I read aloud. Audumla was the primeval cow in Norse mythology, whose milk nourished the first beings. Sigrid's eyes widened in realization. Frozen tears. It's talking about a glacier, but which one? I scanned the rest of the decoded message, my heart racing. There's more. It mentions Hrafnafloki, the Viking explorer who discovered Iceland. Legend says he landed on the south coast, near what's now Vatnajökull National Park. The Vatnajökull Glacier, Sigrid breathed. That's where we need to go. Within hours, we were in a rented jeep, speeding towards the national park. The landscape changed dramatically as we drove, lush fields giving way to stark, volcanic terrain, and finally the looming presence of Europe's largest glacier. As we approached the glacier's edge, I felt a strange pull, as if some unseen force was guiding us. There, I said, pointing to a section of the ice that seemed slightly different from its surroundings. That's where we need to look. With the help of local guides sworn to secrecy, we began our excavation. Days of careful digging passed, the anticipation building with each layer of ice we removed. And then on the fifth day we hit something solid. It's wood, one of the guides shouted, his voice echoing across the icy expanse. As we cleared away more ice, the unmistakable shape of a Viking longship emerged. Despite being buried for centuries, the ship was remarkably well preserved, its dragon-headed prow still fierce and proud. It's incredible, Sigrid whispered, running her hand along the ancient wood. But how are we supposed to sail it? We can't exactly drag it to the ocean. As if in answer to her question, I noticed something carved into the ship's side. Another runic message. As I deciphered it, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the surrounding ice. Speak the words of awakening, and the path shall reveal itself, I translated. I think this ship is more than just wood and nails, Sigrid. Taking a deep breath, I spoke the words written in the runes, my voice carrying across the glacier. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a groan that seemed to come from the earth itself, the ice around the ship began to melt at an impossible rate. The guides backed away in fear, crossing themselves and muttering prayers. Sigrid and I watched in awe as a channel of water formed, leading from the ship all the way to the distant ocean. Are we really doing this? Sigrid asked, a mix of excitement and fear in her voice. I nodded, climbing aboard the ancient vessel. We've come too far to turn back now. As soon as we were both on board, the ship began to move of its own accord, gliding down the magically formed channel towards the open sea. We watched in amazement as the glacier sealed itself behind us, erasing any evidence of our discovery. Once we hit the open water, I pulled out the notes I had made from Snorri's journal before it was lost. According to this, we need to sail north by northwest, following the path of the Raven Star. Sigrid looked up at the sky, frowning. But it's daylight. We can't see any stars. As if in response to her words, a spectral constellation appeared in the sky above us. A raven formed of ghostly light. I guess that's our guide, I said, still trying to process the impossible things we were witnessing. We sailed for days, the magical ship navigating the treacherous North Atlantic with ease. The weather remained surprisingly calm, as if the very elements were conspiring to aid our journey. On the 5th day of our voyage, as we sat on deck discussing our next move, a terrible roar split the air. The sea around us began to churn violently. "What's happening?" Sigrid shouted over the sudden wind. Before I could answer, a massive shape burst from the waves beside our ship. It was a serpent, larger than any creature I had ever seen or imagined. Its scales gleamed with an otherworldly iridescence, and its eyes glowed with an ancient, terrible intelligence. "It's Jörmungandr," I gasped, recognizing the legendary world serpent from Norse mythology. But it can't be real. Real or not, the serpent was very much a threat. It coiled around our ship, its enormous body threatening to crush us. I frantically searched my memories of the myths, trying to recall anything that might save us. The horn, I suddenly remembered. Vikings believed the sound of a horn could drive away sea monsters. Sigrid dashed to the ship's prow, where an intricately carved horn hung. She grabbed it and blew with all her might. The sound that emerged was unlike anything I had ever heard, deep and resonant, seeming to shake the very air around us. The serpent recoiled, loosening its grip on the ship. With a final, ear-splitting shriek, it dove back into the depths, leaving us shaken but alive. As the sea calmed, I felt a strange sensation wash over me. The world around me seemed to fade, replaced by a misty, dreamlike landscape. And there, standing before me, was a man I recognized from ancient illustrations, Snorri Sturluson himself. "You have come far, keeper of stories," Snorri said, his voice echoing strangely in the misty realm. "Am I dreaming?" I asked, my own voice sounding distant to my ears. Snorri smiled enigmatically. "Dreams, visions, reality. At the edges of the world, such distinctions matter little. You seek the truth of the hidden manuscripts, do you not?" I nodded, unable to speak. "Know then that their purpose is not mere knowledge, but balance," Snorri continued. "The old gods are stirring, drawn by the belief and fear of men. The manuscripts contain the power to keep them in check, to maintain the boundary between their world and ours." "But why hide this knowledge?" I asked. "Why not use it?" Snorri's expression grew grave. "Power such as this corrupts absolutely. It must be guarded, used only in the direst need. That is the task I pass to you, keeper of stories. Guard the balance, lest the twilight of the gods descend upon the world of men." Before I could ask more, the vision faded. I found myself back on the ship, Sigrid shaking me urgently. "Freya, are you all right? You went all glassy-eyed for a moment there." I blinked, trying to process what I had seen. "I'm fine. I saw Snorri. He told me the true purpose of the manuscripts." As I relayed my vision to Sigrid, the mists around our ship began to part, revealing a rocky shore ahead. The island that emerged seemed to shimmer and shift, as if it wasn't quite part of our reality. "Is that it?" Sigrid asked, her voice hushed with awe. "The final resting place of the manuscripts?" I nodded, a mix of excitement and trepidation filling me. "I think so. But something tells me our greatest challenge still lies ahead." As our ship approached the mystical shore, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were crossing a threshold, not just to a hidden island, but to a realm where the lines between myth and reality blurred. Whatever awaited us on that misty shore would change everything, not just for us, but potentially for the entire world. "Ready?" I asked Sigrid as we prepared to disembark. She nodded, her face set with determination. "Ready. Let's finish this." Together we stepped off the ancient longship and onto the shores of an island that seemed to exist outside of time and space, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead in our quest to safeguard the balance between the world of gods and the world of men. The mist-shrouded island materialized before us as our battered longship cut through the choppy waters. An eerie stillness hung in the air, broken only by the gentle lapping of waves against the shore. As we stepped onto the beach, the sand beneath our feet seemed to shift and shimmer as if struggling to maintain its form. "This place," I whispered. "It doesn't feel real." My guide, Eric, nodded grimly. "The ancient texts speak of realms beyond our own, where the lines between reality and myth blur. We must tread carefully." No sooner had the words left his mouth than the landscape around us began to warp and change. The beach melted away, replaced by a dense forest that seemed to breathe with a life of its own. Massive roots twisted beneath our feet, forming a maze-like pattern that stretched as far as the eye could see. "It's a labyrinth," I realized aloud. But not just of paths, of illusions. Eric drew his sword, its blade glinting in the strange, shifting light. "Remember what we've learned. Norse mythology is filled with trickery and deception. We must rely on our knowledge to see through the lies." As if in response to his words, the forest before us split into 3 distinct paths. Each one shimmered with a different hue: gold, silver, and bronze. A disembodied voice echoed through the trees. "Choose wisely, seekers of truth. One path leads to glory, one to ruin, and one to that which you seek. But beware, appearances can be deceiving." I closed my eyes, forcing myself to think. In Norse mythology, gold is often associated with the gods and their realm, Asgard. It's tempting, but too obvious. Eric finished my thought. A trap for the greedy or unprepared. I nodded, turning my attention to the silver path. Silver is linked to the moon, to magic and mystery. It could be the way forward, but it might also lead us astray into endless illusions. Which leaves bronze, Eric mused. Less glamorous, but associated with humanity, I concluded, with craftsmanship and perseverance, the qualities we'll need to unravel this mystery. Without further hesitation, we stepped onto the bronze path. The moment our feet touched it, the other paths vanished, and we found ourselves plunged into a series of vivid, lifelike scenes from Norse mythology. We witnessed the creation of the world from the body of the giant Ymir, saw the gods constructing Asgard, and felt the terror of Ragnarok looming on the horizon. Each vision tested our knowledge, forcing us to separate truth from embellishment, myth from historical fact. "Look there," Eric shouted, pointing to a flickering image of Odin hanging from Yggdrasil, the world tree. "The runes he's carving, they're wrong." I squinted, recognizing the trap. "You're right. Those aren't the runes of knowledge Odin sacrificed himself to obtain. It's a test. We have to correct them." Working together, we rearranged the illusory runes, and the scene before us shattered like glass. We found ourselves standing before a massive stone door, covered in intricate carvings. "The final chamber," I breathed, my heart pounding with anticipation. But as we approached, a spectral figure materialized before us. A towering warrior clad in ancient armor, his face hidden beneath a winged helm. When he spoke, his voice rumbled like distant thunder. "I am Hakon the Old, guardian of secrets long forgotten. You who seek the hidden wisdom of the Skalds, prove your worth, or be forever lost to the mists of time." Eric raised his sword, but I placed a hand on his arm. "No," I said softly. "This isn't a test of strength. It's a test of knowledge." I stepped forward, meeting the spirit's gaze. "Great Hakon, We have journeyed far and overcome many trials to reach this place. We seek the lost manuscripts of the Prose Edda, not for personal gain, but to preserve the wisdom they contain for future generations. The spectral king tilted his head, considering my words. Pretty speech, young scholar. But words alone are not enough. Answer me this. What is the true power of the stories contained within those ancient pages? I took a deep breath, thinking carefully before responding. The true power lies not in secret knowledge or magical incantations, but in the connections they forge between people across time and culture. These stories have endured for centuries because they speak to something fundamental in the human experience. Our fears, our hopes, our search for meaning in a chaotic world. Hakan nodded slowly. A worthy answer, but knowledge without action is meaningless. Are you prepared to bear the burden that comes with these manuscripts? To protect them, even at great personal cost? I am, I said firmly, though my voice trembled slightly. The spirit raised his hand, and the stone door behind him began to grind open. Then enter, seekers of truth. But be warned, the price of wisdom is often higher than you expect. As the door swung wide, revealing a chamber bathed in otherworldly light, a bone-chilling scream echoed from behind us. I whirled to see Eric caught in a tangle of ghostly roots that were rapidly pulling him into the ground. "Eric!" I cried, lunging for him, but Hakon's spectral form blocked my path. "Choose, scholar," the spirit intoned. "The manuscripts lie within your grasp, but your companion's life hangs in the balance. Which will you sacrifice?" Time seemed to slow as I stood frozen between my lifelong quest and the life of my friend. The manuscripts contained knowledge that could reshape our understanding of history and mythology. But at what cost? In that moment, I saw the truth that had eluded me throughout our journey. The real power of these stories wasn't in some hidden magical knowledge. It was in the way they brought people together, the bonds they forged. "I choose him," I said firmly, turning away from the open door and rushing to Eric's side. Together we fought against the ghostly tendrils, and with a final, desperate heave, I pulled him free. As we collapsed onto the ground, panting, I looked up to see Hakon's spirit watching us with what seemed like approval in his ethereal eyes. "You have chosen wisely," he said. "The true legacy of the Skalds lies not in dusty tomes, but in the stories we live and the connections we forge. You have proven yourself worthy of the knowledge you seek." With those words, the island around us began to fade like mist in the morning sun. The last thing I saw before everything dissolved was the open doorway, a warm, inviting light spilling from within. As the world rematerialized around us, we found ourselves back on our longship adrift in the vast North Atlantic. But we were not empty-handed. In my arms lay a bundle of ancient parchments, their pages filled with the long-lost words of Snorri Sturluson. Eric, still shaken but alive, managed a weak smile. "It seems, my friend, that the greatest test was not of our knowledge, but of our hearts." I nodded, carefully unrolling one of the precious manuscripts. "And in passing that test, we've unlocked something far more valuable than mere words on a page." As the sun broke through the clouds, illuminating the ancient text, I realized that our journey was far from over. The true challenge, preserving and sharing this knowledge with the world, was only just beginning. The journey back to Reykjavik was a blur of exhaustion and elation. As our ship docked in the harbor, I clutched the precious bundle of manuscripts to my chest, hardly daring to believe we'd succeeded. But the victory was bittersweet. Eric limped down the gangplank, his face etched with pain. The mystical roots that had nearly dragged him into the earth on that vanishing island had left their mark. Dark tendrils snaked beneath his skin, a constant reminder of how close we'd come to failure. "We need to get you to a hospital," I insisted, but Eric shook his head. "No time," he growled. "We need to secure the manuscripts first. My contacts have arranged a safe house." As we made our way through the winding streets of Reykjavik, I couldn't shake the feeling we were being watched. Shadows seemed to move of their own accord, and more than once I caught glimpses of hooded figures ducking out of sight. The safe house turned out to be a nondescript apartment above a fish market. The smell of the sea permeated everything, but I barely noticed as I spread the ancient parchments across a weathered table. "It's really them," I breathed, running my fingers reverently over the faded runes. Snorri Sturluson's lost manuscripts. Eric collapsed into a chair. His breathing labored. "Then let's not waste any time. Start translating." For days I pored over the texts, my excitement growing with each passing hour. The manuscripts contained far more than just mythological stories. They were a window into a lost world, filled with historical details and cultural insights that had been lost to time. "Eric, listen to this," I said, my voice trembling with excitement. According to Snorri, the Prose Edda wasn't just a collection of myths. It was a code, a way of preserving ancient knowledge that predated even the Norse settlements in Iceland. Eric leaned forward, wincing slightly. "What kind of knowledge?" "Everything," I replied, gesturing to the scattered papers. "Astronomical observations, navigation techniques, medical knowledge, and hints of something even greater. Snorri talks about a hidden realm that exists alongside our own, a place where the gods themselves once walked." A sharp knock at the door cut our conversation short. Eric was on his feet in an instant, hand going to the weapon at his side. "Were you followed?" he hissed. Before I could answer, the door burst open. 3 figures in dark robes swept into the room, their faces hidden beneath deep hoods. "The manuscripts," one of them intoned, voice muffled. "Hand them over, and you may yet leave this place alive." Eric drew his sword, but I could see the effort cost him. The magical infection from the island was spreading, weakening him by the hour. "Who are you?" I demanded, trying to buy time as I frantically gathered the scattered pages. The lead figure pulled back his hood, revealing a face lined with age and marked with intricate tattoos. "We are the keepers of Yggdrasil, sworn to protect the secrets of the ancient world from those who would misuse them." "Misuse them?" I scoffed. "We're trying to preserve this knowledge, to share it with the world." The old man's eyes narrowed. "You are a fool if you think the world is ready for such revelations. The manuscripts must be destroyed for the good of all." As he spoke, his companions began to advance. Eric moved to intercept them, but his weakened state betrayed him. With a single brutal strike, one of the keepers sent him crashing to the ground. "Eric!" I cried, torn between helping my friend and protecting the manuscripts. In that moment of indecision, the third keeper lunged for the papers, but as his hand touched the ancient parchment, something extraordinary happened. The runes began to glow with an otherworldly light, and a voice that was not my own spilled from my lips. "Hear me, keepers of Yggdrasil. You who claim to protect the ancient wisdom have become its jailers. The time of hiding is past. The world teeters on the brink of chaos, and only by embracing the knowledge of our ancestors can we hope to survive." The keepers recoiled, shock evident on their faces. "How?" the old man whispered. "How do you know the ancient tongue?" The words continued to flow through me, a torrent of archaic Norse that I somehow understood perfectly. I spoke of the hidden realms, of the cyclical nature of time, and of a coming darkness that threatened to engulf the world. As I finished, silence fell over the room. The keepers stared at me in awe and fear. Finally, the old man spoke. "It seems we have misjudged you, scholar. The manuscripts themselves have chosen you as their voice. We cannot stand in the way of such a clear sign." With that, the keepers bowed deeply and withdrew, leaving us alone once more. Eric groaned, struggling to sit up. What just happened?" I shook my head, still dazed. "I'm not entirely sure, but I think we just gained some powerful allies." Over the next weeks, I threw myself into completing the translations, now aided by the strange new knowledge that had awakened within me. The manuscripts revealed a tapestry of interconnected myths and histories, stretching back to the dawn of human civilization. But as I neared the end of the final text, a realization began to dawn on me. The true power of the Prose Edda wasn't in its secrets or prophecies. It was in the stories themselves. the tales of gods and heroes, of triumph and tragedy, that had captivated people for centuries. "Don't you see, Eric?" I explained, my eyes shining with excitement. "These stories aren't just entertainment. They're a blueprint for understanding the human experience. They teach us about courage, sacrifice, the consequences of our actions. They connect us to our past and give us guidance for the future." Eric, his condition stabilized thanks to knowledge gleaned from the manuscripts, nodded slowly. "So what do we do now? How do we share this with the world without causing panic or misuse?" I smiled, an idea forming. "We do what the skalds have always done. We tell the stories. Not all at once, not every secret, but we reintroduce these myths to the world, let people rediscover their power and wisdom for themselves." Over the next months, we worked tirelessly to prepare the manuscripts for publication. We collaborated with historians, linguists, and even the keepers of Yggdrasil to ensure the knowledge was presented responsibly. The day our book hit the shelves, I stood in a small Reykjavik bookshop, watching as people eagerly snatched up copies. An old woman approached me, her eyes twinkling. "You're the author, aren't you? The one who found the lost manuscripts?" I nodded, somewhat bashfully. She smiled, patting my hand. "Thank you, dear. These old stories, they remind us of who we are, where we came from. In these troubled times, that's more important than ever." As she walked away, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment wash over me. We hadn't just preserved ancient texts. We had rekindled a connection to our shared human heritage. Eric appeared at my side, looking healthier than he had in months. "Ready for the next adventure?" he asked with a grin. I laughed, gesturing to the bustling bookshop. "My friend, I think the adventure is just beginning. These stories have the power to change the world. Now it's up to us to make sure they're heard." As we stepped out into the crisp Icelandic air, I felt a sense of excitement for the future. The legacy of the skalds lived on, not in dusty tomes or hidden chambers, but in the hearts and minds of people around the world. And I knew that as long as these stories continued to be told, a piece of that ancient wisdom would live on, connecting us all through the power of myth and the enduring human